Welcome to the Jaybefaunt channel. I am your host, James Fauntlord. It's so good to see all of you guys here today with me. The Jaybefaunt channel is also part of Revolutionary Blackout Network, so you can find me there for the JB show on Sundays at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, as well as for the monthly roundtable. If you guys have not already, please go ahead and do all the things. And what things am I talking about? Go ahead and give a like to the stream. This helps me out to be able to reach more people as well. And by the way, and I forgot to mention this, but if you guys are ever watching my clips and you click like, and then there's a hype feature that comes on, you guys can actually hype my video if you guys would like. I think you guys get like 3 per week. And so that also adds so I can be able to reach more people. So if you guys like to, you guys can do that for the clips that I upload for hyping up the video. So thank you so very much for that. Also, if you guys would like to, you guys can join my mailing list at jaybefaunt.substack.com. Whenever I go live like this, you guys also get email notifications whenever I write any articles, have any clips, or go live like this as well. And also, if you guys would like to, you guys can also send me a question and I will give a video response. Or if you guys want me to react to a video, you can do that through QBounty at qbounty.com/Jaybefaunt. So what we're going to be talking about today is going to be a big day for stories. And in fact, I actually have 4 segments today because one news story I just found out when I was creating the stream. So we are going to be talking about all the things today. So let's get into the thumbnail and we will get into this. So let me share the thumbnail here. So we're going to be talking about first things first. This is not on the thumbnail because of not having time to create a brand new one. But we're going to be discussing about the death of Jesse Jackson, Reverend Jesse Jackson. So we're going to be having that discussion. He died, I think it was last night at the age of 84. So we'll be discussing, excuse me, the nuance that is the history and activism of Jesse Jackson. And I know there's some people who are Black and on the left have some things to say in regards to him, as well as some people who are just Black, period. They have some thoughts about him and what he stated and how we move as a community. We're going to be getting into all of that. But also, what we're going to be talking about first, we're going to be also discussing in regards to Jesse Jackson. We're going to be talking about reparations that has been awarded or that's being awarded in Illinois. So that's going to be a great conversation to have. And it's $25,000 reparations. So we're going to be discussing that, how it will affect the Black families in Evanston, Illinois. We're also going to be discussing about hazardous chemicals in hair that is really marketed to Black women. And so this is going to be a story really about a health concern that we should be ringing the alarm on in the Black community, especially. But first, we're going to be having a discussion about what we can learn about Venezuela. And we're going to be having Chris Begley joining us today. He is also a member of Black Alliance for Peace as well. So we're going to be talking about power to the poor, Venezuela. Thank you so very much, Chris Begley, for joining. You're muted.
Sorry, thank you. Thanks for allowing me on. Glad to be here. Just a quick overview. I think we'll go over a quick breakdown of the history of Venezuela, and then we can get into some more analysis on current events. I think one of the things I see people sort of unfamiliar is sort of the legacy of Venezuela as it currently exists, as well as sort of like how it's existed in Latin America. So it's slightly different than, say, the United States, where if you read some scholarship like from Gerald Ford, you understand that the American Revolution was a bit more conservative for the time as opposed to like the French or the Haitian, and also in our case, not necessarily Venezuelan, but the sort of Grand Colombia, sort of Latin America, sort of pan-Latin America sort of project that was being built. So, you know, notable figure, of course, would be Simón Bolívar, slightly misunderstood, but mostly very complicated, like many liberal figures for his time, I'd say.
Yeah.
A lot of people bring up his complicated relationship with slavery.
Mm-hmm.
Early on, he was more of a standard sort of like what we call Creoles, or sort of the descendant of Europeans, who were the ruling class of the region at the time. Um, so he was a military general who rose to power that way, and sort of through his advocacy for like a free sort of Venezuela, sort of Colombia, sort of northern and sort of central, a free South America, let's say, away from Spanish rule. He was punished and eventually exiled. He
Mm-hmm.
to Jamaica, and then eventually fled to Haiti. I should say, was invited into Haiti. So his sort of progress, I should say, progress on the issue of slavery develops mostly around his time in Haiti, where prior to he really didn't care much for it. He saw sort of slavery. He was very, let's say, racist at the time. He very much believed that white people were superior, and so they should sort of lead the country and lead the political project he was planning. But he then, after spending time in Haiti, as a promise of support, he promised to free slaves. This was a bit controversial, not controversial for the time, of course, but also we could say contemporarily, because he didn't necessarily did an outright abolition. He believed that it would be tied to sort of as a patriotic thing, tied to if you fought for him, he would free you. But if you're already enslaved, he didn't necessarily at first advocate for that. Eventually, over time, he sort of changed, and he saw slavery as a sort of social, it led to social unrest, so to speak. So not necessarily he believed in full equality for African indigenous people, but thought that slavery as an institution, similar to say like a Thomas Jefferson, so to speak, that it was unstable. And while I would say he advocated more aggressively than Thomas Jefferson, who Jefferson thought it would eventually fade away, he believed sort of that it was not. Both of them sort of had the belief that it was an unstable institution, which I guess proved out right for them. So it was sort of like Simon Bolivar was really a controversial figure, but his main sort of reasoning why the modern Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela sort of call on him is as a sort of revolutionary figure who showed that through revolution, not only did he advocate for the removal of Spanish rule, but also saw that he was willing to take steps to change his views and become even more progressive, advocating eventually for the abolition of slavery when he was appointed to be the president of the republic.
Mm-hmm.
So as we see as Venezuela sort of developed, though, we see that it was really a sort of like neo-colony of the United States over time, especially when you see the oil sectors in like the 20th century develop.
Mm-hmm.
You see many of these Latin American, Venezuelan in particular, in our case, sort of ruling class being mostly European, mostly Creole descendant or mixed descendant, with them really dominating the economy, with the vast majority of people, as we see, often living in poverty, and sort of taking advantage of the situation, acting as what I like to call a comprador class, sort of a collaborationist class that helps like the larger imperialist nation, sort of like propped up puppets, as one might say, and taking advantage, gaining lots of wealth. And you see that the U.S., due to its geostrategic, like its proximity to Venezuela, I should say, and Venezuela being along the coast of the Caribbean, it had a geostrategic importance, as well as it having some of the largest known oil reserves as we know nowadays. So in that sort of like, with that sort of importance, the United States has always been involved in Venezuela. In addition, Venezuela's oil is very crude, so it's very hard to process. So the U.S. actually took advantage of this by having, what they would do is they would just extract the oil and have it refined in sort of like the South Coast, like mostly in Texas and like around Houston area. Now in modern days, we see that like India and Russia and China have also gotten involved, as well as actually Germany and Spain having facilities as well. But the vast majority of Venezuela's oil has historically, and even currently to this day, been dominated by Western capital, specifically U.S. capital. And so we see that nowadays, and how Donald Trump's discussing sort of how we're going to take the oil from Venezuela. But if you sort of actually, I would say, if you look at the situation, you see a lot of oil companies are actually not that interested in the oil in Venezuela because of how expensive it is to refine. Because sort of what we're seeing is sort of this play similar. I think we see this in how they're now going after Cuba, which isn't known for having natural resources the U.S. want. That it's really more of about the geostrategic necessity of not getting the oil to China rather than having it for ourselves, and also like keeping the Bolivarian project, the socialist project in Venezuela, from developing further. If we actually look back a little bit and go to the 2000s, we can kind of go over the rise of like Hugo Chavez. He kind of comes to power as this left-wing military leader who there was a popular revolution actually in the early 90s. Well, not a popular revolution, but a coup attempt by many left-wing and progressive forces in the military that ultimately failed, however, led to his popularity. And then afterwards, we see sort of like the late 90s, early 2000s, the rise of like the Bolivarian Revolution. We see Hugo Chavez become the presidency and sort of this political movement come to power in Venezuela, and has more or less been the dominant political force. Now, we still have those residual elements because the Bolivarian Revolution wasn't, say, like a Russian Revolution or a Chinese Revolution where they necessarily overthrew and, as many know, sort of more militaristically and more violently overthrew. However, they came to power in more of the sort of like what is known often as like sort of the pink tide, the sort of wave of like popular movements in Latin America, and due to their parliamentary system allowed them to sort of become a dominant seat in government, and sort of from there they're able to seize state control that way, while not as fully as saying like Russia or China was. They were able to still be the dominant power and were able to be sort of a force that the people could use to sort of combat imperialism and capitalism, the domination of the ruling class in Venezuela. We do see, though, that, of course, because of the U.S.'s nature, they're constantly interfering in Venezuela. We see it's very common, a very, very common tactic that we saw in 2024, that the U.S. will automatically side with the opposition during an election and claim that the opposition won and that the election's false. Now,
like
I would
Guaido, right?
Yeah, like Juan Guaido
Yeah.
or
That
Maria
loser.
Corina Machado, and even before that, yes, exactly. We see that they're very much invested in the Bolivarian Revolution failing. We see that with also what happens when the Bolivarian Revolution came to power. They immediately started Venezuela already had a state-owned oil company, but it sort of acted like a proxy. They gave sort of sweetheart deals to the United States, and it was a very incestuous relationship between U.S. capital and the Venezuelan state oil company, where it more acted just as like sort of like a more convenient way of having to export the oil, as it was. They didn't also allowed like Venezuelan oil companies to not develop, which would even a capitalist oil company would be as a stronger competitor possibly to the United States, even potentially. And so with the constant interference we see in Venezuela, we see this sort of culminating, I would say, in around with the sort of under the Obama administration, Chris, what's the word? I'm so sorry. Categorizing Venezuela as a national security threat, and eventually laying the groundwork for Trump to place the sanctions, which immediately sort of halted a lot of the developments of the Venezuelan revolution. A lot of Western we saw large amounts of capital flight. So while many would say that it would be good for Western corporations to ultimately get out, capital still needs to come in for investments to uphold. There still needs to be the money and resources, because Venezuela is a very underdeveloped nation, as I was speaking before, due to so it similar to, say, China and with the opening up and reform, so to speak. There's still the necessity for some amount of capital from somewhere to come in, even if it needs to be controlled, as opposed to, as we're seeing, unregulated capital or no capital has devastating consequences for Venezuela and most any nation. But as many have explained, and I like to say, Nick Cruz over on the RBN main channel and on his own channel talks about Nicolas Maduro, and actually specifically the current acting president, Vice President Delcy Rodriguez, have carefully navigated the sanctions placed on them to the point where actually, I think around the early 2020s, we see that Venezuelan economy actually starts to grow. So while they are still heavily sanctioned, the people are still living in poverty, we see that they're still able to navigate these sanctions and develop their economy. And even under this, we still see that they're providing healthcare. They're still trying to lower the cost of food for their people. Yeah. They're still providing education to their people. They're still trying to build up their revolution, and they're also still trying to show solidarity to other nations. Venezuela has historically and famously cut ties with the Zionist entity, and I want to say 2008 or 2009, around the rise of Hugo Chavez, and has, as far as we're aware, seemed to not have re-engaged those ties. There was reporting about a possible oil tank. I don't want to get too much into speculation on it, but I do want to iterate that there is the claims are somewhat contested, and I would say some of the reporting on that it is going to Venezuela seems to be more spotty than the reporting coming out of Venezuela, arguing that it is more of a sort of a false flag. I do think it's sort of in line with this, like I was speaking on earlier, this common trend to undermine the Bolivarian revolution, to make it seem like there's sort of there's dissent, there's rampant corruption, and there's not a line of solidarity. Although I would like to say these claims, I feel like, can be contradicted, even if we look at the nature of Venezuela right now. Well, even though their elected president was kidnapped and taken to the United States on trumped up, pardon my pun, charges, but we do see that the republic still stands, that while there's claims that the hydrocarbon law, and I'm sure it is heavily influenced by what happened, if you look at some of the reporting out of Venezuela, that I would say there is a strong argument that this sort of reform was necessary, and it's sort of like a not necessarily a coincidence, but that it's not a fully a full retreat from the revolution, so to speak, but but more of a restructuring. They're sort of doing and allowing in for Western capital to sort of attempt to redevelop. That process is always fraught. There's always open for the opportunity, corruption, abuse. Whenever you bring capital in, it brings in exploitation, but it is done so in balance with the idea that we still need to develop Venezuela up as a country. They do tend to reinvest these into the welfare state, sort of the development of the people. At the same time, along with this, there's also a reform in the introduction of a new plan to actually lower the cost of groceries and sort of bridge the gap between sort of the agricultural, more rural sectors of society inside the more urban industrial segments. We do see that I do think there is still seen a commitment to the Bolivarian process. And I think fundamentally, I would say that what we're seeing here in Venezuela is sort of a strategic retreat due to enhanced pressures, with an attempt to still maintain their solidarity. I mean, if we're looking at Venezuela, it really is a country that is heavily, heavily, heavily under siege, similar to a Cuba, with them being able to try to use their natural resources to navigate the situations and looking to key allies around the globe to sort of balance them. I mean, in addition to if we go more on additional ways that Venezuela has sort of played a sort of revolutionary role, we know historically was a key contributor to the Cuban Revolution, providing fuel. We see that also in tie with the Trump administration's attack on Cuba, immediately trying to remove the oil tankers going directly to the nation. But as someone who is of Haitian descent, I also like to point out that Venezuela also plays a key role in also helping the Haitian economy, providing oil subsidies. And not only Cuba and Haiti, but if you actually look at some reporting, even Black American communities in the United States have received aid directly from Venezuela. If we look at the sort of New Orleans at the during Katrina, so we see that I would say the Bolivarian revolution currently in Venezuela right now is sort of this progressive force. Hence, why it is so targeted by the Trump administration, and not even the Trump administration, but the both wings of the ruling class.
Can I just say something?
Of course.
Hugo Chavez son George W. Bush. He sunned him. Because how are you going to have a hurricane affect one of your biggest cities, one of your most famous cities in the United States? You don't do something, but then Hugo Chavez is like, all right, I see all those black people over there. All right, we're going to help them out. That's like being an absent father, and then another dude comes in and goes, okay, I'm going to provide for your kids better than you can. And the next thing you know, he provides for them, and then you're trying to stop it because you don't want their kids to like that other guy. But you should have been there for your kids in the first place. Like, it's crazy to me. So I'm like, how are you going to let yourself get sunned by another head of state in your own country? It don't make no damn sense to me. I'm sorry.
I see nothing but facts. I mean, look at Cuba. Let's put it this way: there's more Americans given free education under Cuba than under America. Like, I mean, by the state, I should say. Obviously, there's scholarships and free rides, as they say. Mm-hmm. So there's ways to navigate that. But Cuba has programs bringing over U.S. citizens who want to be doctors. Like, we see this is I think more if I'm going further, more of like what we see of these progressive states, like these states that are trying to build a better world, and part of that process, I would say, is something we see in the a community of Latin American and Caribbean states known as CELAC, with their 2014 Declaration of a Zone of Peace. This was done in Havana, Cuba, and sort of this project that actually my organization, the Black Alliance of Peace, has been a part of this sort of campaign to sort of center America from the Alaska to Patagonia, let's say, as a zone of peace. We see the Latin America is this sort of region that for the past 200 years has not had interstate conflict. What we really see is the U.S. going in there and using the Monroe Doctrine, which is now being called the Donroe Doctrine, or I should say being updated to being the Donroe Doctrine. And sort of like we see on January 3rd, tragically, with the kidnapping of Nicolas, Maduro, and Celia Flores, as well as the killing of over 100 people, including 30 Cubans. We see that also that the United States has been the driving force in keeping Latin America from being a zone of peace. I mean, we know about Operation Condor. When we had during the Cold War, we had these sort of left-wing movements, even then, sort of rising and taking power and then being crushed by the United States. So this is nothing new, but we do have to look to the past to learn, but still not forget that the current and the future will be different of its own. So I bring this up to say that the project for a zone of peace, as understood by BAP, is centered in a process called people-centered human rights, where it is the people who determine their rights. And I think this is very well emblematic of how Venezuela has built up their sort of revolutionary process, being rooted in the commune system, where we have these cooperatives and these collective communities all around Venezuela that are working to build a better society within Venezuela by taking the first steps in their own lives by organizing their communities and trying to address their needs, not by looking for outside help, but by building up from their own. And we see that with Hugo Chavez declaring that the communes are the foundation for the revolution. We see I think I was reading some news, and Delcy Rodriguez is talking about how there is a collective media international blackout on the actual nature of the Bolivarian Revolution, because if people understood it, similar to Cuba, it's the thought of a good example. People mostly understand Cuba because it has been heavily blockaded, and due to the proximity, there's a lot, even if some of them are ringed, there's a large Cuban population in the United States, and it's much more easy to access Cuba, but the nature of Venezuela being further away, having and the nature of how the longer tradition of the United States and also a slightly different revolutionary process has led to the Bolivarian Revolution being somewhat misunderstood often in the West. And I think we understand the concept of people-centered human rights. We can then apply that to ourselves. And we see that, I think, if we were to tie it into our own context, what happened in Minnesota recently, where we have people going out in the streets. We see people demanding their rights, not looking for elections, not looking for political leaders, but going out and doing the actions themselves to make sure that they have the rights they need. Well, yes, this comes at a heavy cost, but it's less of a cost than doing nothing if we look at the grand arc of history, because it is those who do nothing that are constantly treated the worst.
Yeah. One of my questions, though, is, in context of how Black Americans see themselves when it comes to geopolitics, because a lot of Black Americans have the thought that we should care about what goes on here more than what happens out there, because it's directly influenced by what happens to us here at home. Why should Black Americans have such an invested interest in what happens in places like Venezuela or Cuba, or as we see, emerging in places, I think is Nicaragua. I think they may have either somebody that's more left-leaning. Why should they care more than is typical, especially in the age of the Don Rowe Doctrine?
That's a great question. I do see this sentiment online as well. I haven't encountered it too much in person, but it could just be not the conversations I'm having, of course. I would like to somewhat push back on that, but I remember seeing several years back online a comment that I think sums it up very well. The sentiment being that it wasn't the difference between Black Americans as well, and then Afro-Latina or Portuguese, not Portuguese, but Afro-Brazilians and sort of the Frank African world, sort of like Haitians like myself and my mother. We see that that it's really, the difference is where the stop was on the boat. I mean, if we're looking at, if you look the trend of percentage of Africans who were brought over to be enslaved as a percentage of the current demographics of the nation, well, it's just, if you go up the coastline, the further north you get more, the further south you get less. So we see Brazil with 75%, we see the United States with close to 13%. And I think fundamentally, I would argue that those who are African American, Black Americans, ADOS or FBA, if they choose to identify as an identity group, I think they have to understand the reality that the United States, those who are your enemies, the ones who have currently and historically oppressed you, don't really care about. They don't look at it that way. They happily collaborate with their Euro descendant allies across the world, but in our case, Latin America, and it is just to our advantage to also make those same bridges. Fundamentally, it's not really. We need to break down these concept of borders. I understand somewhat, not fully, but I somewhat get the sort of sentiment of we're tired and we need to do stuff. But I tend to wonder where it comes from. Sort of like, it's not really historically how it's been viewed, because we look historically, many of our leaders have been from different parts of the Caribbean and Latin America and have immigrated or descendants of immigrants, like myself. Or also we see that if you look at actually in the case of the Civil War and the emancipation of African slaves in the South, that prior to that we see the Haitian Revolution, and even intermarried between that, we actually see many Euro descendant Haitians, in quotes, I should say. They wouldn't have been Haitian, but Euro descendants of the formerly what became Haiti, fleeing with their enslaved Africans to the South into Louisiana, and those enslaved Africans actually rising up and attempting to free themselves there. We see it was very much understood at the time by Euro-descendant American ruling class and the enslaved African proletariat of the South that Haiti was an inspiration. It was a model of victory. If we actually look at the nature of the American Civil War, it was not about, how should I phrase this? It was about the institution of slavery, but it was not with the intention to free slaves, if that makes sense. I mean, we see Lincoln very clearly stated that he would happily keep slavery, maybe not happily, I should say, but was willing to keep slavery if it meant, quote unquote, preserving the Union. And we see that actually the Southern Confederacy cared more about not just maintaining the institution of slavery, but maintaining the white rule over African and Black people, and to maintain this sort of I like to think of it as a neo-Roman slave empire, and building out and expanding it westward and even into the Caribbean. But we see that it was actually that Black people freed themselves. They saw that the opportunity arose, and they didn't really care. They didn't care what the Union intended. They didn't care about anything. Once they started to be freed, once they realized that the North could possibly actually win the war, they started fleeing en masse, and then those who stayed eventually became probably one of the most successful general strikes, if any, in American history, so to speak. And we see that it was these Africans who freed themselves, and we saw that this freedom was not a full emancipation, full citizenship, but into second class status. But this process was not done at the benevolence of anyone. I don't want to overemphasize about not necessarily like the demographics, because I do think there's clearly heavily this is class based. I would argue, and that I'd argue that race and class are fundamentally similar. They're linked together and they can't be separated. But we do see that this attempt to maintain Africans sort of as a second class status, a subjective status. But we still see that they understood people-centered human rights. Even if they didn't have the language to articulate at the time, they understood that they had to free themselves. And I would be shocked if they didn't understand that, due to the nature of the Haitian Revolution, where it is very famously understood that they did free themselves.
Yeah. So it sounds to me, and I'm just summarizing this in my head in a nutshell, is that it is important for us Black Americans to care about what's going on in Venezuela, because ultimately it is about the same ruling class that is oppressing Venezuelans. It's the same ruling class that's oppressing us here at home, and how they achieve and get their powers through extracting the resources of places like Venezuela in order to be able to continue to have that power over people like us here. And so those power structures must be dismantled here, as well as it'll affect people abroad. And so it feels like there's a twofold purpose of dismantling this system. The first part is dismantling this system so that it allows us to be able to have a direct democracy, so that we can build up our material conditions for ourselves. But this also gets rid of the specter of the corporate parasitic class that also dominates over countries like a Venezuela, a Cuba, a Nicaragua, ones that are trying to take over places like Bolivia, Haiti, right? And so it's basically, what's the best way to put it? We are in this machine, and people like us Black Americans, we are being rolled over by one tire, but there are other people being ran over with another tire. And even if we were to slash that one tire of the machine, of that car, that kind of disables it a little bit more. And if they do it with the other tire, they slash it as well. That disables the car even further. But it's important to realize that they are being, uh, you know, they're being oppressed just like we are. And so I think there's value in solidarity in that. One of the things that, and I'll share this. Um, Let me see. That's weird. Oh, I see. Um, is this question from Roger Meadows? And I had this question in my head as well. It says, what about Afro Venezuelans? I think he means being treated as second class. From what I recall, Chavez did was more theatrical than substance, not too many in positions of power. Um, I know we all know that anti-blackness is everywhere, but my question is, does the anti-blackness in places like Venezuela and in Cuba or China or DPRK, does that discount the revolutions and how they can benefit Black people, and would it make it harder or easier for Black liberation to come?
I think that's a good question. I'd say. In the nature of Venezuela, actually, Hugo Chavez identified as Afro-Venezuelan. If you see specifically at the Bolivarian Revolution, we see that prior to the Bolivarian Revolution, about 5% of Venezuelans identified as Afro-Venezuelan. But in the most recent census, it's actually up to 49%. So actually, we see sort of that. I would push back on the notion that it's that's performative, given the overall that these aren't. I don't think a bunch of Afro-Venezuelans came into Venezuela. I think actually it's more. We see that that the anti-blackness in like say Cuba or Venezuela is more rooted in their colonial tradition. While I do not deny that these exist, I would like to understand that this is like a dynamic process, and that over time these attitudes have to be materially addressed. And I mean, if you look in the case of the United States after the Civil Rights Movement, while they're I would argue that would be more performative than, say, in the case of Venezuela with sort of how they view their process. Specifically in the case of Cuba, Cuba has historically been understood to be, from my understanding, to be part of actually seen as part of the Pan-African tradition. Specifically, if you look at their support for Angola, which they specifically cited Afro-Cuban descendants as part of the reason, seeing it as a joint sort of sister nation. I would say in the case of China and the DPRK, that anti-blackness is a bit, I think it's different than, say, what we're looking at in the case of the United States. And even like Venezuela and Cuba, I'm sure to an extent, the sort of structural anti-blackness. I think we have to look at the difference between anti-black sentiments, which are abhorrent, but are not the same as structural anti-blackness. I think to quote, forgive me if I'm wrong, but to quote James Baldwin, they I won't contribute the quote to James Baldwin because I don't want to confirm it, but there's a quote, if a white man does not like me, that is his problem. But if the state allows him to do violence against me, then it becomes my problem. Sort of, we have to look at, in the case of Venezuela and Cuba, that they have already taken steps to address their anti-blackness at a state level for the revolution, and that obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, but yes, there was definitely anti-blackness in this nation. Anti-blackness is a global phenomenon. But I do want to push back that anti-blackness is, like, the United States is a unique case of anti-blackness that is nearly uncomparable around the world, and that we should not lean into Afro-pessimism. I've seen it called, the belief that Black people are sort of inherently oppressed, almost somewhat in like the similarly, not to the same extent, not one-to-one, but it's the idea of like Zionism, where Jewish people are eternally oppressed. When that is actually, if you look historically, a European phenomena. I think we see the same sort of thing playing out. This sort of that this, and I think this comes from capitalism's European roots. This this overemphasis, even by people who are attempting to do to address anti-black, sort of structural anti-blackness and sort of advance black liberation, that we still have to understand, like, often we have to interrogate our views and seeing if they are where they are rooted, and where's the root of this sort of this sort of sentiment is coming from. And I think we need to look at these nations the same way historically the Black Liberation Movement or the Black Radical Peace tradition is the Black Alliance of Peace likes to reference as they look to these countries you listed as allies, because while Black Americans might not always understand it, our role in American history is understood around the globe. We and Black Americans in particular are looked at as the, if not necessarily the vanguard, so to speak, as a progressive element that is historically been oppressed and has been one of the key demographics, key groups, key political forces in this nation progressing politically.
I think there's a difference between interpersonal white supremacy or anti-blackness and then systemic anti-blackness. I would argue that we live in the most anti-black country in the entire world here in the United States. In places in Latin America, there are probably strides that are going on in places like Venezuela and Cuba that are trying to root it out. It is really going to be, at the very least, a centuries-long project in order to be able to root it out, because white supremacy is so prevalent. In regards to places like DPRK and Vietnam and China, I think sometimes people confuse ignorance for anti-blackness or ignorance for bigotry. And unfortunately, Black Americans especially, we are so hyper aware of anti-blackness that even ignorance can feel like oppression. Ignorance can feel like us being discriminated against when a person just doesn't understand. So in regards to what's going on in Venezuela, a lot of what we hear in the United States is, a lot of times from secondhand accounts, right? How many of us Black Americans speak Spanish fluently, right? And go to places like Venezuela on a regular basis. And so we may hear, oh, they're this way or that way. And we may hear it from an anecdotal perspective. But somebody can also give an anecdotal perspective and be like, oh my God, America's so amazing, when we are looking at them like, what you smoking, right? And so I think there's that point there as well. There is a channel that I've been watching lately. His name is Elliot Sang. I'm not sure if you know of him.
Yeah, I've watched it.
Yeah, but he has a secondary channel called Elliot Sang. It's a Elliot Sang again. And one of the things that he talked about recently was the Super Bowl and the Bad Bunny performance. And one of the things he made abundantly clear is that he said Latin America wouldn't exist without Black people. Because originally, Latin America was populated by indigenous people, but then African slaves during chattel slavery were brought over to work in these areas. And so now, because a lot of people don't realize that there are Afro, Argentinians, Afro Ecuadorians, there, we all know Afro Brazilians, they're Afro Colombians, they're everywhere.
Across the whole thing.
Yeah. But it's just not talked about because unfortunately, there is a caste system and a whitening of the race due to white supremacy having such a huge stronghold in Latin America. But it's no different than the stronghold of white supremacy that we have here in the United States. And so I feel like um, we can be very touchy, because if we smell it even a little bit, it's like, okay, I should not go there. But at the same time, I'm thinking to myself, there's anti-blackness in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
There's anti-blackness in the black community.
Mm-hmm.
Has anybody ever heard of the brown paper bag test? Colorism, that's anti-blackness too. So I think we have to take that into consideration as well. And if there is any anti-blackness, are they taking steps to root it out? The problem here in the United States is, if there is any steps, it's performative, like people kneeling in kente cloth, right? Is there any systemic steps that are being done? And, of course, we have to do our research. But if so, then they're at least a couple steps ahead of the United States.
No, I think that's a great point. I mean, just to kind of go further with you, I mean, I think we have to understand sort of like, I think to kind of go on your point before, I think to give some space to people who are reacting to the ignorance as anti-blackness. I think we also have to acknowledge that in the case of America, that doesn't really matter. Like, ignorance in the case of America leads to like violence that might not, like, and that people have to that people realistically are like dealing with, and not just dealing with, but suffering immensely. But I do think that we need to, like you're saying, like look to these nations and seeing what steps they are actually taking, and understand that also that Latin America, Central and South America, the Caribbean, there's a lot more Africans than there is in the United States, and the different countries, different communities have at different levels. I mean, in the case of Venezuela, I personally think we should support the Bolivarian Republic, because if we look at the opposition, they are very anti-black. And we actually looked at there is a predominantly black community in Caracas, where the opposition supporters went in and just found a random Afro-Venezuelan and just lit him on fire. Like, we see that
Yeah. In fact, I remember, because I listened to Ben Norton quite a bit, and he was talking about that story. And they were looking for Chavistas, who are people who subscribe to the same politics as Hugo Chavez. And a huge chunk of the Chavista movement is Afro-Venezuelan. And so they were looking for somebody who looked like they were a Chavista, and they went after an Afro-Venezuelan, the right-wing opposition, and they burned him alive. Yeah. Heard about that.
So just to kind of go further, I do think like we have to look at everything in sort of relation and context of itself, right? If we go to some maybe more philosophical stuff, I know sometimes we get to on the channel, sort of if we get into conversations about materialism versus metaphysics, and dialectical materialism, sort of metaphysics. I mean, we have to. I think sort of this notion of looking at anti-blackness as a set of beliefs against African and perceived black and perceived African people, as opposed to a historical institution with ideas, beliefs, and practitioners. And I think we need to look then at what nations are doing. I mean, if we look at Venezuela, we see that Afro-Venezuelans are supporting their process, Chavismo, the Bolivarian Revolution, the Bolivarian Republic. I think then we need to, we should understand that they are probably going to have a better analysis of the situation. I mean, I think we need to sort of I think there's a quick sort of push to expand, like to believe that America is sort of like much less unique than it is in some sense, but also American exceptionalism sort of has two sides. It gets exceptional privileges that it want, but it sort of like all the good things about America is unique. All the bad things, that's just human nature. You know, the common anti-communist argument also I think applies here. And so I think what we're seeing really in this sort of phenomena of looking at it is sort of just a failure of analysis not rooted in historical tradition. And I think if we understand history, the history of the Black radical tradition in the United States, we have to understand it as something that should have been in the civil rights movement. I think this is Malcolm X I'm referencing, something that should have been more global, something that should have been more international, and that we have to sort of look to our allies. Might not be our neighbors all the time. They often will be, and they often are. And I think we should obviously fundamentally organize with our neighbors, but we do have to understand not necessarily that we should overemphasize and always look to outside, but that we do have a history of strong allyship outside of the United States.
Yeah. I think it's unfortunate that, unfortunately, a lot of Black Americans do not feel that way as of late. You know, some of them are expressing some of the anti-Blackness of people who have migrated here. I think part of that is manufactured. So for people who migrate here the legal route, they are particularly picked, especially if they made it in their country. And so the people who make it in their country, they're usually picked people who are more on the right wing and as well as more anti-Black. And they're the ones who are chosen to come legally versus the ones who may be lower on the economic ladder and maybe more pro left wing or pro revolution. They're held back. They're like, no, you can't come in until their situation gets so precarious that they have to come undocumented or illegally. And then they finally come in, but then they're demonized and said, oh, you guys can't have solidarity with them because they're going to be just like the other ones that came in here legally because they're anti-Black just like them. And if they came from Venezuela, they both must be anti-Black because this one was anti-Black. And so it's almost like painting an entire group of people with a broad brush. And then this creates a response from Black Americans saying, well, look, like they are anti-Black, so therefore we have to be anti them because they're anti us. And so we have to alienate ourselves because there's a difference between delineation and alienation. And I want my, Black American siblings to realize that there's a difference. And so unfortunately, some will see and go, well, these immigrants are being anti-Black. And they know that it's for the reason of self-preservation. And unfortunately, it is a system that is built by white supremacy in order to keep the people who are part of the oppressed class as divided as possible so that we'll be at each other's throats instead of at the Epstein class's throats.
Yep.
And so this is one of the reasons why I was saying to you before we went live, I'm like, we know all this stuff about the Epstein class, and yet they're still sitting in Calabasas and in the Hamptons, drinking mimosas and eating caviar. Mm-hmm. And we're still suffering. Yet a lot of these people are still living their life, going on private jets, going on yachts, going on trips, and nothing's being done. And yet we're at each other's throats because of the lies that we were told, whether we are in the southern part of the Americas or we're the northern part of the Americas or across the oceans.
No, I think that's fundamentally breaks it down great. I mean, if you look at like U.S. immigration, I mean, I remember that was part of the conversation in 2024. I mean, there was those notable cases. I don't think it was, I haven't looked at the numbers, but I think it's the majority. But the notable cases of like you saw increased votes by the Latino community for Donald Trump, and some of the rhetoric around that, some of the people arguing is the unfairness of the immigration system. Some people, depending on what country you come from, to determine your sort of immigration status. My mother is lucky that she married my father, who is an American citizen, so she got citizenship that way. But I have cousins who have immigrated. It's very difficult to get citizenship for them. I mean, if we're going sort of to take a step back and sort of if we go back to the anti-blackness, Haiti's the only country in the Caribbean, in what is known as CARICOM, the Caribbean community. So just like the sort of multi-state organization. Collaboration. They're the only ones who need a visa to go to the countries. So we do, and we see like Haiti as the premier sort of black republic, so to speak. Maybe premier might not be the best word, but the sort of like the first one. They're similarly used as an example and treated poorly. I mean, I think other than that, I think sort of plays into this sort of understanding as well, because it's part of this tiered system of immigration. Actually, specifically, if we get into left-wing politics, you have to mark that you're not a member of a communist party. You're not a communist to like enter the United States. Why? Well, I thought we was free speech, free politics. Obviously, it's free for who and all that fun stuff. But
I'm gonna address something really quick. And yes, Roger, I understand you can't force solidarity. It does take two to tango, but at the same time, both houses need to learn how to clean themselves, because Black Americans don't have solidarity with LGBTQ freedmen. So therefore, we need to learn how to clean up our own house. Also, we need to start getting rid of all the misogyny and misogynoir that exists within the Black community too. So if we're actually going to start talking about to tango when it comes to solidarity, we need to start having solidarity within our own communities. And we also need to let and allow people who are from South America to also do the same when it comes to addressing their own anti-Blackness. But we also have to address the bigotry within our own communities as well. And so in order for that to be able to happen, we also need to start having more conversations with each other and start actually having more solidarity. And also there's a classism that also exists within the Black community, the freedmen community, especially because we take on this white supremacist type of air and think of ourselves as better just because we are born in the United States and not in Africa. And so this is something that I think that we need to address, especially within the Black community. And if we don't, then we will never be able to find solidarity with each other, and we'll never be able to actually come together with other groups as well. And then they will see us as disorganized and discorded as well and say, hey, maybe we should just keep to ourselves. And so we also need to be the group that we want to unite with as well. And so they have to work on themselves. We have to work on ourselves, but it can't just all be, well, they got to work on themselves. We're okay. We're not. So I think that's something that we have to work on too. And so my thing is, Black Americans, we gotta clean our house.
I can't disagree with that. I think we have to understand as a community that there's issues internally that are dividing us, and whether, yes, there's because of colonialism or white supremacy, they're still there. They need to be addressed. We need to work on it. I think, fundamentally, I think, sort of going back to what I'm talking about, dialectical materialism, Mao talks about this, the qualitative to quantitative change. So, quantitative to qualitative, I'm sorry. So he uses a pot boils with water as each temperature incrementally changes and eventually changes from a liquid to a gas. I think solidarity can be viewed in a similar way. It is the quantity of interpersonal connections we have with people, building those personal relationships that over time develop to the quantitative change that becomes a class solidarity, a sort of a solid independent Black movement, a Black political identity, and we need to understand that it is not forced. He's correct. Roger Meadow is 100% correct, and that it's not forced, but it has to be built. And we have to understand the timeline we're working with. We have to understand the forces we're up against, and we have to understand that the genocidal Epstein class wants to control the world and is willing to take us all out if they can. They're willing to just nuke it all and just leave it, or they're burning it all in climate change. Like either way we look at it, we are an existential threat.
Yeah. And unfortunately, when it comes to climate change, my fear is that there's so many of us who, a lot of times we talk about what's happening, especially in the Caribbean, because they're very vulnerable. But most Black Americans, we live in the southeastern United States where we are either at or near sea level. I'm in Florida. We're not okay. So we gotta, reel in this whole climate change issue right now because it's affecting us too. And I feel like that's a whole nother thing that we have to tackle as well. And with that, I also wanted to direct attention to this that you also wanted to talk about. You talked about the zone of peace, and I found this to be very interesting when I first read it. But I was like, oh, this looks pretty interesting and very cool. And so it's basically U.S. NATO out of our Americas. And so I think this is something that we also should push for, is making it so that, because the hegemony is ruining us, right? All across, both continents, right? It's ruining us because when people say America first, like when the rich say America first, they're not talking about the rest of us. They're talking about them.
No, I mean, I think I appreciate you bringing this up. I do think specifically the Black Alliance piece work with the building a zone of peace and their zone of peace and their sort of demilitarized, their demilitarization campaigns. I think specifically it's sort of just building off what we've been talking about today, but sort of like it's, I like to think of it, it's like an institution that seeks to like sort of take what we've been discussing and apply it. So we get into stuff like, you get in campaigns, you do work, and then we take this sort of discussions we're having now and apply it to our conditions. So I'm in Chicago. Chicago, we have they're building, it's called the Illinois Quantum Computing and Microelectronics Park. It's based out of the South Shore community on the south side of Chicago, where there's an old steel plant. It's called U.S. Steel. So this ground that's already polluted, heavily polluted, they're trying to remediate it, so sort of redevelop it, and then build this giant quantum sort of like industrial park, which will have multiple different like large tech firms using AI, quantum computing, also a joint collaboration between the local Illinois state government, city of Chicago, Cook County, the local county government, the U.S. Department, DARPA, so the Defense Department, as well as multiple different universities in the area. So what's Israel? Of course, because of all bad things. Was it Epstein said all roads to Tel Aviv? Not really, but tongue in cheek. We'll see. But we see this as sort of like this military base attached, because if we look actually into quantum computing, there's not really much commercial use for it, and so far it's really been useful for mass data surveillance and encryption breaking, which is aka keeping track of everyone and making sure your passwords are good. So or more, or even still, if you have a hard drive, you say you have a hard drive storage that's encrypted, they'll try to break that, try to get access to your files, information, see what you're doing. So we see this as sort of like, if we apply the zone of peace to, say, my condition in Chicago, I want the U.S. military out of Chicago. I want cops out of Chicago. I want ICE out of Chicago. I want these federal and state forces that act as like these paramilitaries for the capitalist class to beat people's head and to be out of our communities, and that resources and funding from our tax dollars. In the case of the state, when you get to the federal level, with sorry, I'm blanking. Modern monetary theory, MMT. We look at this. It's a little bit different, but at the state level, we see our money directly coming and being paid for policing, to abuse us, to exploit us, to oppress us. We look at the framework of pure blue standard human rights, similar to what the Black Panthers did. We go out into the communities, we organize, we educate, we agitate,
Yeah.
we provide mutual aid. We get out there and we try to give the people the resources and then give them an analysis to understand the conditions. Sort of like a doctor, you give them the medicine and then your leg might have been broken. Well, your leg was broken because maybe you tripped, and maybe you tripped because you didn't have enough, your shoes weren't good, or whatever, or maybe you're working 20 hours a week in a job with poor regulations, so you broke yourself while working. We have to take this and then understand, no one's here. Like as Nick says, no one's coming to save us. We have to save ourselves. And that sounds scary at first, but then when you realize there's more of us than them, you realize, do I really need someone to come and save me? And in reality, I don't save myself. Me and my community, we save each other. It's our family, it's our friends, it's our neighbors, it's our loved ones, it's our coworkers.
Mm-hmm.
It's us coming together as the people and people-centered human rights and doing the political action necessary, doing the work necessary to build that society where the ruling class has no excuse but to expect their rights because we built the conditions for them. Who cares if SNAP has funding? If we have a mutual aid network where farmers out in the country are giving food to people in the city, and we just make sure that there's enough people working on the farms, the farmers taken care of, the people in the city are taken care of, and we as people run society already. We need to just take a step back and organize without the capitalist class involved.
Be the government that you want to see.
Exactly. What Fred Hampton say? If you're scared of socialism, you're scared of yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I also want to talk. I want to share this as well because I really appreciate this one. I'm going to make sure I get this right. The people-centered human rights, and this is also out of Black Alliance for Peace. You shared this with me. This was actually an event that was held, 6 years ago, almost 6 years ago. And so you guys had a webinar. And so it was with Jaribu Hill and Ajumu Baraka. And so you guys had that basically talking about people-centered human rights, the Black radical alternative. And so, really, the people-centered human rights really is just essentially about putting people first, and profits, will eventually come. But really, it's about our needs as people being paramount. There was, I'm blanking on her name, but she was recently talking on Channel 4, and she said one of the things that keeps us in a chokehold within this system is that the autonomy that we had before mass industrialization was stripped of us. So a lot of us lived on farms. How often did we have to struggle with hunger? We really didn't, because we lived on farms. And so unless you were a sharecropper and the owner was stripping, all that from you, which is exploitation. But if you were just an independent farmer by yourself and you didn't have to worry about somebody stripping you of your resources, then, you can save some of that food for yourself and then sell the rest. And so, now, since we all have to go into the cities and work in the cities, now we, our sustenance come from the wages that we're given from these capitalists, and we're producing way more than we're producing profits way more than what we get back as wages. And so that's one of the biggest issues that we're facing now within this system. And so we're trying to build our self-sustainability within mutual aid networks again.
No, exactly. I think I would say people-centered human rights. Maybe I would take even a step further, not necessarily focusing on people, but understanding that rights come from the people, if that makes sense. So
that makes perfect sense. Yeah.
Yeah, you can have it. Look at how many rights are actually given by the Bill of Rights versus by the guns, bayonets, and blood of even if we don't agree with them, the settler colonial state of Illinois, or not Illinois, I'm so sorry, the United States. And then, or in the case of the Free Republic of Haiti, I think to understand that it's not the UN, it's not even just the state, is the people themselves. It's understanding that rights are not. It's sort of the difference between materialism and metaphysics, idealism, like we talked about before. That rights are not an idea; they are a relationship you have to your environment, I should say, because I think it even goes further than your society. But like the right to be able to go out into the woods for a walk. That isn't just because people decide it. People have to maintain it. People have to go and build the paths. You have to work at a job where you have the time to go do it. You have to be given the accessibility. Because if you have a disability, do you not have the right to go out into nature, or do you? And if you look at in a lot of places in America, people with disabilities do not have that right because that infrastructure hasn't been made. Yes, maybe you could sue for that right, but so you're up to the opinion of a judge.
Yep, absolutely.
Is that a right? That sounds like a privilege to me.
You're echoing George Carlin right now, which it wins brownie points with me.
I'm glad. Anytime I can reference George Carlin, I'm happy to.
Yeah. Man. Thank you. You have been very generous with your time. I've told you 45 to 55 minutes, and we went over because the conversation was just that good.
I'm glad.
And you can let people know like where they can find you, what you have coming up. Do you have a channel, or do you write any articles that you want to plug?
I currently don't. Actually, if anything, I'll just shout out my org. Check out the Black Alliance of Peace. Check out Black Agenda Radio. Black Agenda Report and Black Agenda Radio. Hopefully in the future, I do hope to sort of contribute more, but mostly I have just been working a bit more behind the scenes, building up stuff there, getting involved locally a bit more. But yeah, I mean, my analysis isn't necessarily it's not fully unique. It's unique because it's mine, of course. But if you like the ideas, I'm saying watch RBN, watch Geopolitical Commentary, Ben Norton. I'm so sorry, Ben. Watch Mint Press News. Watch. I like Drop Sign News. Watch Savvy. If you're on this and you're not watching Savvy Sabs, I'm happy that me and JB are the first people to tell you to go watch her amazing show.
Yeah.
Just go out there, look for left-wing independent media. Another nation, Danny Haifong. We can be here for the next hour listening off these great journalists.
Yeah.
Obviously,
I wish Jamal Thomas well, because I know he's going through a lot. But Jamal Thomas,
yes,
and Garland Nixon, man, powerful people, man.
Yep. I mean, like, if you see a Black left-wing independent voice, go ahead and hit subscribe, like, follow, whatever you need to keep them in your inbox. Just go out there, look up. This analysis is out there. I also second look up international stuff, Telesur, RT, TGTN, I can't butcher this, Al Jazeera. It's not the best, it's liberal at times, but look at liberal sources, look at the New York Times, Fox News, whatever. Look at anything, read as much as you can. Get as much information as you can, because you never know where you're going to learn stuff. But make sure that you have a solid. But make sure you're also reading political theory. Read the don't read Noam Chomsky anymore. No, I'm kidding. You can read Manufacture Can't want, but read Inventing Reality anyway. I prefer it personally. I think it was a better book. But either
Michael
way,
Parenti's always a win.
Michael Parenti's always great. Read Michael Parenti.
And Margaret Kimberly.
Please read Margaret Kimberly. Read her articles. Read her books. Read everything by her. Black liberation media. Disagreements at times with them, but I think. Always good to get on and see. Always good to see independent voices, and always good to just sit there and engage with people who are trying to build a better world.
All right. That was Chris's recommended reading list. All right. Thank you so very much for coming on, and I hope to have you back on very soon for more analysis.
All right. I'll try my best. I'll try my best.
Right, thank you
so much.
All right. Bye-bye. All right, folks. That was Chris Begley joining me for a conversation about Venezuela. Make sure to look out for him once again. Thank you so very much to everybody. And please go ahead and do me a favor and go ahead and give a like to the stream. This helps me out to be able to reach more people. And I appreciate you oh so very much for doing so. All right. So we're going to get into the comments and the chats. Oh, you know what? Before we do, I messed something up. JB, you messed something up? Yes, I messed something up. Look, baby, just because my skin is flawless doesn't mean I'm perfect. Anyways, let's get into what we're going to talk about. One of the things I want to do is I want to give a shout out to the patrons on Patreon so that, we got to pay the bills, Can you pay my bills? Keep paying my telephone bills. Keep paying my automobiles. And then maybe we can chill. All right. So let's share this and then we shall get to the next stories. All right. So thank you very much to all the patrons on Patreon. Without you guys, I would not be able to do this. And here are the tiers that we have. We have Mega Jaybefaunters, Super Duper Jaybefaunters, Super Jaybefaunters. We have Jaybefaunters. We have Comrades. We have Solidarity. And we have JB members. And to all brand new members, also, we have new member Sean Brock. I'm not sure if I said that one before, but he's getting a shout out once again. Thank you to all new members for becoming patrons on Patreon. This helps me to be able to keep the lights on. Literally. I try to do that almost kind of like a heavy D, like dilly. Anyways, thank you so very much for contributing to the channel. This helps me out to be able to reach more people and be able to do this more on a regular basis. Y'all make this channel possible. This is a full grassroots operation. Let's get into the comments and chats. Let me check on the kick side. The kick side is the Crip side. No, just kidding. It's not. Sorry. I'm being silly today. Maybe that lunch that I had just is starting to kick in, the energy from it. We're good on the kick side right here. We already are doing good over there. Let's go into the Rumble side to see if we have any Rumble rants. All right. Looks like we're good on the Rumble side. No rants right now, but that could always change. All right. And also, let's go into here. All right. So I want to show this. Hemp Car says Cynthia McKinney and William Pepper said Jesse with FBI since day one. Okay, I'm gonna read that for the Jesse Jackson segment. Save that for a little bit. You see, I already read that. Thank you very much for this, Roger. He says, the people determine their rights. I had no idea they were citizen-initiated constitutional amendment country. There's a lot of countries that are actually more direct democracy. It's just the United States doesn't want us to know, because if we knew, then that means we would demand more from our government. And we probably have something a little bit better. Man, they never want us to have good things, right? They could have gave us so much. They could have gave us so much, but they said, nah, you can't have it. Damn Yankees. Anyways, thank you very much for this, Roger. He said, once upon a time, FBA showed solidarity with many Black immigrants who came here, but they made it a point to delineate from us. Yeah, I mean, they did. And of course, I mean, delineate. I think it's really just a part of, white supremacy as a means to separate and preserve themselves. Is it wrong? Yeah, it is. But it's good to know the reason behind it as well. At the same time, some of our own did the same thing. Just like Samuel L. Jackson's character in Django. He delineated from the rest of the people on the plantation. So, I mean, I'm not using him as a historical figure, but, it's like we've had people like that. What's his name? Was it Booker T. Washington? Essentially was kind of like, I don't want to say tap dancing, but basically he was like, well, we just need to keep quiet and just, accept our breadcrumbs, and we'll finally be able to have enough breadcrumbs to build a slice of bread. And the rest of us were like, hell no, we ain't doing that. We want the slice now. So, I don't know, man. We just, some of us, I don't know, man. We have to, like I said earlier, we got to fix our own house, and they have to fix theirs. But I'm gonna be honest with you, man. White supremacy really did a number on all of us, man. It is. Whew. And just think about it. Like, for instance, a lot of times we talk about, not having Black fathers in the household, and it's like, but who took those fathers away? Did they just walk away on their own? Some, yeah, but a lot of them, no. It's the system, the way it's built, or it's just one of my stories. We talk about healthcare. Well, we're going to be getting into healthcare of Black women. And that's going to be a story I think that we need to talk about too. But it's like, they know it's harmful, but they're still going to do it because they know they can make money off of us. It's sad. White supremacy, man. Ever since the Fire Nation took over, if you know, you know. Let's continue on, get a couple more regular chats, and then we shall move on. Yeah, I would definitely want to read that. Hang on. Let me make sure to star these because I want to read this for this Jesse Jackson segment that we're about to get into. That looks very interesting. All right. Let me go to the first part. You see, Zero says, it's been a while, Mr. Fauntleroy. Did you get my email? So I think I did. I just do not download anything from emails. It looked like a document. I don't know if it was. I'm not trying to get no spam. If it's a document, if you can copy it and paste it and send it directly to me instead of me having to download anything, I heavily appreciate it. But I try not to download anything from an email, especially from somebody who I don't know. So, sorry. So I think I got it, but I'm being cautious. Look, I saw, because I get spam all the time. And every single time I see spam and they're like, download this, download your receipt because you spent $5,000 on this pogo stick. And I'm like, nice try, Satan. Not telling you that, but I mean, to the scammers. And I'm just like, nah, I'm not falling for that. So I'm a little bit hyper vigilant. I'm sorry, but if you can just like copy and paste it and put it in the full email and just be like, here, this is what I saw, blah, blah, blah. And just let me read it straight from the email. I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm just trying to be cautious. Because, look, this computer, this is my workstation. I need it to work properly. Edward says, hey, JB, Trump said that. Oh, I'm going to save that one for the next segment. I'm going to save it because we got to get into it, y'all. Okay. Thank you very much, Edward, though. I see you. CBC voter coming in, saying happy Tuesday at JB. Good to see you. Jace saying good afternoon, JB. Good to see you. Bryce coming in saying good afternoon, JB. Hey, everyone. Let me see. He said, yeah, he didn't get my email. I'm leaving. Okay. Sorry. I'm just now getting to the chat. And so what, you sent this at 3:07 and it's now 4:28. If you didn't want to wait for me to get past my interview to acknowledge it, then I guess maybe it's not that important. I don't know. But have a nice day. All right. Notori in the chat saying, JB, good to see you. All right. Let me see. Oh my God ruler says, hi there. Hello there to you. Jacqueline coming in saying, hey, JB. Hey, everyone. Thank you so very much. Let me see. Just trying to make sure. Did I say hello to Holly? I'm sorry. I didn't get to say hello to you. All right. Good to see you. We have a court lord saying, Bryce, court lord. Good to see you. Let's go into. Oh, I missed this one. Thank God I went through. Roger says, so after decades of getting dissed, we said we'll do the same. The burden is now on them to find solidarity with us. I mean, okay. Is this going to be a generational tit for tat? That's what it feels like. It feels like a generational tit for tat, like mass tit for tat, one group versus another. I don't know. And I don't know. I think this is a conversation that, you know, Black Americans just need to have with each other. Because this whole, like, there's a big group of them that have been like this to us, and it's like, okay, but the group of immigrants that are here in the United States is not representative of the entire group of people that the country that they came from. And so therefore that would kind of be like a Black American going to Africa or going to any other country, and then, you know, there's a few of them that have done some horrible things, and then people go, oh yeah, all Black Americans are just like this. And it's like, well, no. And then people say, well, there's enough of them. This is kind of like, but then at the same time, it's like, well, we see enough white people doing certain things, and so then we're very ultra cautious around white people. So it's kind of a catch-22 in that arena. I can't necessarily, I don't have an answer. I don't have an answer. I just know that we need to get rid of white supremacy and capitalism as soon as possible, because if not, then we're all going to die. Are we going to keep fighting each other, or are we going to save ourselves and then fight about it later? I don't know. But at the same time, it's like, how can I fight with somebody if I can't trust them? Because if I can't trust them, then if they don't honor my existence, then how can I unite with them? That's another aspect. So it's like there's contradictions upon contradictions. And so I feel like I'm stuck in the middle of this whole thing. That's what it feels like to me. I feel like I have one side where it's like, okay, we need to just keep to ourselves and not deal with anybody else. But then another side is like, well, how are we going to be able to get liberation if we don't have solidarity with other groups? Because if we're not going to have solidarity with them, then we can't expect solidarity with us. And then it's like, well, we try to have solidarity with them, and then they rejected us. But then it's like, okay, but we still need them, but then they still need us. You know how Rick James kept saying cocaine's a hell of a drug? That's how I say white supremacy is a hell of a drug. Every single time I look up, it's like some new issue where it just keeps us divided. Either we fall for it or another group falls for it, and then it's like, oh, well, we got to separate ourselves. It's just like the gender wars in the Black community. The gender wars are still going on, by the way. Or then it's the wars between people who are cisgender and straight versus the rest of us who are LGBTQ or queer. Hell, there's wars between LGBTQ people. How you have the LGBs without the T's. It's division upon division upon division upon division. It's crazy. And the crazy part is like, okay, what can we see ourselves and each other and get past this? And the problem is that it takes groups of people to be able to look inward and then also take whatever bigotry they have and throw it away. The problem is that they're not throwing it away, or they are. It's just there's a small group of ones that are the loudest that try to make it so that they represent the entire group. Maybe, just maybe, that's what it is. It's a small group of fucking idiots that keep saying the stupid bullshit every single time. And then it causes us to go, well, I guess they all feel that way. All right, then we walking away this way. When in reality, they're a small group and they're the ones who are saying, and the same thing, they look at us like the same way. And then it continues to crumble down whatever rainbow coalition we were trying to get started. Because we hear and we see one person do something stupid and it gets disseminated to everybody, and it's like, oh, well, that's, see, that's how they're like. And then they do the same thing back to us, which they have historically did for 400 years to us. I'm tired. This is a conversation that has to be had, but it is exhausting. Thank you, Rice. He said not all Black immigrants do that. Also be careful to not put all immigrants in a different. There are the same as the people that are here. Some of those that come here are from wealth. Yeah, that's basically what I was trying to say. It's also a class issue, because I'm gonna be real with you. I've also faced some discrimination as well as some bigotry from Black Americans just because I am of a lower class. Case in point, Chris Rock. I forgot, was it Bring the Pain or Bigger and Blacker? He said, who hates N-words more? He said, Black people or white people? He goes, Black people, because we hate them too. And that's what he said. And he said, and the N-words have got to go. And he started complaining about Black people who are typically of a lower economic class. And we laughed at it. But in reality, what Chris Rock was saying was actually classist as hell. Or then, if we want to go there, we start talking about some of the misogyny that happens within our own community. Or we start talking about the homophobia and the transphobia that comes out in our community. Or some of us will also be prejudiced towards people who are neurodivergent. Oh, they don't have no ADHD. All we got to do is bring out that belt and they'll get rid of that ADHD. You remember hearing that? When in reality, they actually do have ADHD. It's just that we do not want to go the route that is actually more healthy because it requires more work. But we can't do the work as well as we want to because we're so busy working at jobs, being underpaid and overworked to the point that we don't have the time or the energy to be able to do what's right properly by our kids. So the belt is the quickest way to get order and trauma out of our children. So guess what? What we do as a Black community, we do the same thing that white oppressors used to do to us because it was fast, it was efficient, it was cheap. I didn't realize I was going to get into this like this, but that's the problem with what we're going through. And here's the crazy part. Other immigrants and communities are going through something similar. I'm hot. I'm starting to itch. I'm hot. Capitalism, white supremacy is the Thanos, and I am ready to grab the gauntlet and snap my fingers and take him and the entire Black order away. I love y'all. All right, let's go into the next segment. Oh my goodness. All righty, guys. Let's get into this. This is going to be a sad story, but we're going to have to talk about nuance. And this just happened last night. So I didn't have a part of this on the main thumbnail, but Jesse Jackson, 1941 to 2026. Let's have ourselves a nuanced conversation. Famous civil rights activist, former presidential candidate, as well as Reverend Jesse Jackson, has died last night at the age of 84 years old. Who was Jesse Jackson? What impact did he have on America, and more specifically, the Black community? And what can we learn now? I have heard of Jesse Jackson ever since I was a little boy, growing up in the 80s and the 90s. Jesse Jackson was famous in the 90s, especially. And as I got older, I started to realize, oh, he actually marched. He was with Dr. King, especially on the day he got assassinated. And so in the Black community, we were taught, especially those of us who are millennial, to revere folks like a Reverend Jesse Jackson. With people like a Malcolm X, there was always a little asterisk by his name. But with Dr. King, there was no asterisk. With Jesse Jackson, there was no asterisk. Because that asterisk always meant, well, they're notable figures, but they may be a little bit too radical. Jesse Jackson was never classified as a Black radical, as far as I know him growing up. In fact, let me take you back. Black people, y'all know exactly what I'm talking about. When the episode on A Different World, where they heard, oh, Jesse Jackson's in town. And then they said, oh, yeah, we're having a special speaker, and they were like, oh, man, we wish we could have Jesse Jackson, but, And then next thing you know, Colonel Taylor, right? I think Dwayne's at Colonel Taylor's house. I think it's Dwayne. And Jesse, you have these like guys that security, they look like Secret Service agents come in, to search out and make sure the house is secure. And they're like, yeah, everything's secure. And they look like Black Secret Service agents, right? And then he walks in and the crowd just goes wild, right? Because it's the Reverend Jesse Jackson. And then Dwayne's like, hey, you know what? You look just like Jesse Jackson. And then he started speaking, Jesse Jackson, he likes to rhyme. He liked to rhyme. And so he's like, Dwayne ends up embarrassing himself. Basically like, oh, you should use that. That will make you sound just like Jesse Jackson. And then Colonel Taylor was like, Dwayne, that is Jesse Jackson. And you find out Colonel Taylor and Jesse Jackson go way back, right? And then at this time in the show, Dwayne is actually going through an election where he's running for some type of student council president or something like that within Hillman. And so he used basically Jesse Jackson as a inspiration for his message to help the students at Hillman, particularly in Gilbert Hall, which is where the students lived, for better conditions as far as them getting their education at Hillman. So me growing up, that's the type of vision I was always engrossed with when it came to Jesse Jackson. I remember in 2008, in November of 2008, when Barack Obama was elected president of the United States. And for a lot of us Black people, especially Black Americans, that was massive. Because we never thought ever that we would ever have a Black president of this country. Forget the the technicality of him being half black immigrant and half white and things. It didn't matter in our heads. It didn't. He had a father from the motherland, and he had an American mom, a white American mom. That's it was like, no, he's black. And all we heard was he was from Chicago. All right, yeah, he black. Right? But I remember at the acceptance speech in a park, and as he was giving his speech, you saw Jesse Jackson with tears in his eyes. Because Jesse Jackson ran for president twice. And here you have a black man that achieved what he was trying to about 30 years prior. I'm sorry, 20 years prior. And so Jesse Jackson was, despite his liberal leanings, for me, it seemed like he really cares about Black America. Do I think that he still did? Yeah. Do I agree with his prescription of liberating Black America through this capitalist system? No, I don't. And so I'm going to be discussing some of the nuances about Reverend Jesse Jackson that some people may not have known. Or if you're younger, meaning if you're millennial or younger, some of you who are Gen X may be able to remember. Some of you Gen X maybe didn't remember because you guys were kind of young. So y'all may not remember, but a lot of boomers definitely will remember Jesse Jackson in some of his stanzas. So I want to get into this here. Make sure I get my bearings here because Jesse Jackson was pretty prolific in the way he spoke. He was a very powerful speaker. But I want to share this. I want to share the family statement first, and then we shall get into and then I will get into some of the political stances that he had that a lot of people may not know too much about. So it says Reverend Jesse Jackson, civil rights icon, dies at 84. And to Black people in the chat, especially, I'm actually curious about your thoughts about Jesse Jackson. I should have made that in a poll, but let me know in the comments in the chat your thoughts of Jesse Jackson. But it says Reverend Jesse Jackson, the civil rights leader, Baptist minister, and pioneering politician who launched 2 bids for the U.S. presidency, died on Tuesday morning at the age of 84. They said our father was a servant leader, not only to our family, but to the oppressed, the voiceless, and the overlooked around the world. Said we shared with him the world, and in return, the world became part of our extended family. His unwavering belief in justice, equality, and love uplifted millions. And we ask you to honor his memory by continuing to fight for values he lived by. So he's survived by his wife, Jacqueline Jackson. He married in 1962 and 6 children. So that was the Reverend Jesse Jackson. I've never seen him anything outside of a mustache. He's always had that mustache. Jackson had weathered a myriad of health issues in recent years. In November of 2025, he was hospitalized in Chicago for treatment of complications of progressive supranuclear palsy, a neurodegenerative condition that he had been managing for a decade, according to a statement by the Rainbow Push Coalition, the civil rights organization that Jesse Jackson founded. It says Reverend Jesse Jackson's stable condition is breathing without his assistance of machines. So that was after his hospitalization. And they said he was not on life support at the time. It says Jackson family extends heartfelt appreciation for the many prayers and kind messages offered during this time. And then he was released from the hospital the following week. And then they talk about how he had been released from the acute care facility where he received additional care following the hospital. It says battled with severe infections consistent with the progression of his PSP diagnosis in the last several months. So he was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease in 2017. And then his PSP diagnosis was confirmed in April of the last year. It says beginning his career as a protege of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Jackson quickly rose to become one of the nation's most prominent and influential civil rights leaders. In 1971, he formed a nonprofit Operation Push, People United to Serve Humanity, to advocate for social and economic parity for Black Americans. Jackson ran for president twice, both times as a Democrat, placing third in the party's nomination in 1984 and a second in 1988, marking the most successful presidential runs of any Black candidate prior to Barack Obama's 2 decades later. Following his first campaign, Jackson formed the nonprofit National Rainbow Coalition, with a stated purpose of affording minority Americans a greater political voice. In 1996, he merged with groups with Rainbow Push and served as head of both until 2023. He was also elected in 1990 as a shadow delegate for the District of Columbia, serving a single term. In 2000, President Bill Clinton awarded Jackson the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the nation's highest civilian honor. So that's him when he was young. And like I said, he's always had that mustache. Always. I've never seen him without one. So he was born in October 8th, 1941 in Greenville, South Carolina, in the segregated South, and grew up poor in a sharecropping family. He was gifted a student and athlete, graduating from high school with offers from minor league baseball contract and a Big Ten football scholarship. He opted instead to attend the University of Illinois before transferring and graduating from North Carolina A&T, a historically Black university. Then he began theological studies before going to work full-time with Dr. King and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. He was ordained a Baptist minister in 1968. 1966, he became head of the Chicago chapter of the nascent Operation Breadbasket, the economic activism arm of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. He was appointed its national director the following year. He helped establish the Chicago Freedom Movement to work for open housing and school desegregation. Jackson participated in many of the civil rights movement's landmark moments, including the March on Washington in 1963, where King delivered his I Have a Dream speech, and the Selma Montgomery marches in Alabama in 1965. He was also with Dr. King when the civil rights leader was fatally shot at the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee, on April 4th, 1968. So that's them together. This is how far back it goes, y'all. And so when he, ran for president, that was huge because the only other Black person that went that national was Shirley Chisholm in 1972. He was elected to serve in the U.S. Senate as a shadow delegate for the District of Columbia in 1991 to 1997. And so he has done quite a bit, right? But one of the things that I do want to share and highlight was something that was pretty interesting in regards to Jesse Jackson. And this is why I say that he definitely did have a love for Black people. This is out of the Atlantic. This came out in 2019. It says Jesse Jackson on reparations. We are due a different kind of recognition. 30 years ago, the Reverend made reparations for slavery core to his presidential campaign. Now he's watching as the House grapples with a proposal to study their feasibility. And so this is in 2019. Jesse Jackson ran for president in 1984 with lots of ideas and little support. The second Black candidate after Shirley Chisholm in the 1970s to organize a national campaign for his presidency. His presence in the race was a nuisance to Democrats at the time, who worried that his policy proposals were too left-leaning. But the Rainbow Coalition, he cobbled together an assortment of minority groups, Black and brown people, farmers and poor factory workers, the LGBTQ community, and white progressives, compelled them to deal with his ideas. Merely being Black and forcing other candidates to consider his very real potential to garner Black votes, which they need, Jackson has had an impact. It says an aide for Walter Mondale, the eventual Democratic nominee who lost, went a step further, telling Smothers that Jackson's being in the race gets more information on things such as South Africa, affirmative action, Black colleges onto Mondale's briefing books. Now remember, South Africa was dealing its issue with apartheid. And apartheid, for those who may not know, apartheid is basically just another word for Jim Crow outside the United States. We experience apartheid here. We call it Jim Crow. But apartheid existed in South Africa, and apartheid also still exists in occupied Palestine by the hands of the Zionist entity known as Israel. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. Stay tuned, folks. It says, but in both his 1984 and 1988 campaigns, Jackson was also pushing for something more tangible, and sweeping than affirmative action. He was calling for reparations. Advocates had tried various successes to attract broad political support for his ideas since slavery was abolished more than a century before. And Jackson wanted to return it to the force of American politics by placing it front and center in a presidential race. 35 years after his 1984 race, reparations is now top of mind on the campaign trail and under discussion in the halls of Congress. Today on Capitol Hill, the House Judiciary Subcommittee on the Constitution, Civil Rights and Civil Liberties will hold a hearing on H.R. 40, a bill reintroduced in congressional session after congressional session for the past 3 decades that aims to create a committee to study and develop proposals for reparations. This panel will feature Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey, a Zionist shill, that's from me, not the article, a candidate for the 2020 presidential nomination, who he also failed and crashed and burned miserably, my words. The writer Ta-Nehisi Coates, whose 2014 work, The Case for Reparations in the Atlantic, reignited the national conversation on the issue. Actor Jenny Glover, the economist Julianne Malveaux, and others. This bill has been supported by several Democratic presidential hopefuls, including Booker, who feel newly comfortable talking about reparations as an issue worthy of serious examination. Unfortunately, with people like Booker, he seems to have more fervor, more zeal for protecting Israel than he does actually getting reparations for his own people. Need I say more? Let's continue on. Says on the eve of the hearing, he talked to Jesse Jackson, made reparations a plank on his presidential campaign. The significance of the attention was issue receiving now, whether he has hopes that reparations will ever be paid for slavery. And so he had a conversation. And one of the things that he said, how did reparations become an issue in your campaign? Jesse Jackson said, well, first of all, we have been free without being made equal. There's historical continuity between blacks being amassed in prison after 246 years of legal slavery. Also, that was intensified because this was also intensified because of President Joe Biden when he co-wrote the 1994 crime bill, which increased mass incarceration, which targeted particularly Black people, Black Americans, particularly Black men, which caused the increase of our prison populations to explode. The United States is only 5% of the world's population, yet we have over 25% of the people incarcerated in the world. That just lets you know how white supremacy has affected the Black community in this country. People like Joe Biden, who became president, by the way, a Democrat. It says when there was a contest about it in Dred Scott versus Sanford, the Supreme Court ruled that the blacks had no rights after emancipation in the Civil War. Those who had been slave masters became segregation masters. They took away our freedom away from us, and they began to lock up blacks by the thousands to do prison labor, farm labor, the whole range. They just put us back into slavery. Finally, in 1954, broke the backbone legally of that system with the Supreme Court's Brown versus Board of Education decision. But there was never repair for damage done. 246 years of slavery, then legal Jim Crow, and nearly 5,000 lynchings without a conviction. And even today, discrimination by extension of that system has not completely ended. So we had been fighting for repair. We fought against the barbarism for our freedom. Now we're fighting for our equality. We are the foundation of American society, not the bottom, the foundation. When the Declaration of Independence came, we have been enslaved for 157 years. We made cotton king. We are due a different kind of recognition. So just to let you guys know, to people like Shabuzi, no, the foundation of the nation was actually built by Black Americans on stolen land that was genocided by the United States against Native Americans, also by colonizers, European colonizers. So that's a whole nother issue. Is like the whole thing. Like, yes, immigrants contributed, but the foundation was laid by Black Americans. The land was provided by the natives. The foundation was laid by Black Americans, and other people built on top of that. But you would never have this house if it wasn't for Black Americans laying that foundation and Native Americans' blood soaked into the land. You got to keep that in mind. And so he was a big proponent of reparations, which was on the forefront of his campaign, which was also, like they said, a thorn in the side of the Democratic Party. So when people tell you that the Democratic Party is pro-Black, no, they're not. The Democratic Party is not pro-Black. They never have been, never will be. Same thing, Republicans. They're not pro-Black. Never have been, never will be. Abraham Lincoln did not give a damn about Black people. In fact, I will put a little card right there to let people know that you can click on that video of when I talked about the racist history of Abraham Lincoln. Stop glazing that man. He ain't like us either. So now I want to get into another piece, because we were talking about the Reverend Jesse Jackson, right? There was I want to share this because this is an article that came out. So this is an article from Middle East Research and Information Project. It's titled Jesse and the Jews. It says critical coverage of the Middle East since 1971. Let me go to this. Okay. I want to share this with you guys. It says twice in the past year, the crunch came between Jackson and the Jews, and both times liberal Jewish leaders were stamped to the right. In the New York primary, Mayor Edward Koch's attacks on Jackson, aided and abetted by the media's fixation on Hymietown and Farrakhan, and Jackson's embrace of Yasser Arafat, quickly fixed the political debate as in 1984 around a single issue. Is Jesse Jackson anti-Israel and anti-Semitic? Prominent Jewish liberals were mostly silent. In Atlanta, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, AIPAC, and the National Jewish Community Relations Advisory Council, NJCRAC, branded Jackson's minority plank, calling for mutual recognition, territorial compromise, and Israeli-Palestinian self-determination as quote-unquote anti-Israel. Many Jewish liberals, including Saperstein, had only a year earlier signed a statement supporting those principles, but now they refuse to back the plank or the platform. Let's stop there for a second. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Jesse Jackson supported the Palestinians. He supported the Palestinians. And for what it sounded like, I could be wrong. I could be wrong. It sounded like he was for a one-state solution. But, and you want to know why I put so much focus on liberals? Because we all know that the conservatives trash, right? They don't care about us. I want people who continuously think that the Democratic Party actually is for us to stop thinking that, because here you have, when it comes to people in the Democratic Party, you have liberals that are against liberation for Palestinians. Liberals that are quiet, they're silent. Like Beyonce said, they're on mute. And what have we said? Silence is what? Oh, violence. Right, there you go. Sometimes no answer is an answer, because they're not willing to stand up for what's right. That means you're going to go with the flow. Dead fish go with the flow. They don't swim against no current. And so this is exactly why I put emphasis on the word liberal. Because when it comes to the liberation of oppressed peoples, they went silent. Here you have a black man, a black American man, that not only is fighting for his people and saying we need tangible reparations as well. Democrats get mad. Get that N-word. Somebody call Dukakis. We don't want him. And then he expresses and sees what Palestinians are going through. And he takes a play out of the book of somebody like Malcolm X. He's like, hey, these guys. Now, he's not as, radical, right? Because he's like, well, no, we need Palestinians and Israelis to, have equal rights and to be together and have, but there needs to be equality there. So he didn't go as far as, say, a Malcolm X or a Huey Newton or a Fred Hampton or Assata Shakur, but he went further left than the Democrats. And they didn't like that either. Baby, that's why I said, come the nuance. Here comes the nuance. Okay. It says, though Jackson's campaign contains within it a principled movement for Palestinian-Israeli peace led by Arab Americans and progressive Jews, given the historic gap between blacks and Jews, the Middle East position also became a symbol of a deeper conflict, as Michael Lerner, the editor of the liberal Jewish bi-monthly Tikkun, commented by opposing the minority plan, quote, they, liberal Jews, seem to be saying if a black person repeats what we say, the same words somehow become anti-Semitic, end quote. And black Jackson organizers like Mtangulizi Sanyika of Oakland viewed the Jewish preoccupation with the Palestinian issue, Jaime Town and Farrakhan, as a way to say, quote, if it's going to be somebody black, we prefer someone more amiable to us, end quote. And my thing is like, look, Zionists are doing that to people like Jasmine Crockett. Zionists are doing that with people like Cory Booker. They're doing this with people like Hakeem Jeffries. They're like, hey, black people, we gotta support the settler colonial project. See, hey, I'm black. Hi. Oh, we gotta do this. We gotta support the white supremacist oppressor over here. Fortunately, mama didn't raise no fool. And so we're looking at what they're doing, and we look at like how they treated Ethiopian Jews, and we looked at how they are talking about Africans over there that may have migrated over to Israel, and we're just like, yeah, nah, we know oppression when we see it, and what they're doing to the Palestinians, yeah, we ain't dealing with that. Apparently, Jesse Jackson saw it too. And Jesse Jackson got hate. He got some hate. And I'm going to share that with y'all. Because ultimately, he got hate from somebody who is still around today. Let me see this. I want to share this as well because this was, whew. I'll share that. I'll get that in a second. Make sure I have. Yes. I found it. I want to share with you guys this happened in Queens, New York. Right? This was in 1988. And you guys will recognize who's talking. This is Regal Park Jewish Center. I want you guys to recognize who this is. And you'll know exactly who's talking. And you can hear the hate in his voice. Let's go.
I usually begin my speeches by saying I'm glad to be here. Not quite sure that's appropriate tonight. that when I walked up the stairs, I was pushed, that when I came here. Now, if you don't want to hear the other side, then don't stay in this room. Go wait for your candidate and listen to him and make yourself feel good, okay? If you don't want to listen to the other side, please leave. I may not convert you to my point of view, but I will tell you something. If you believe in your argument, you can withstand very easily the argument from the other side. And so if you can't, then I ask you to leave. Let me remind you the last time I was booed publicly, and this was the last time, was something you all abhorred, because I was the leader in the fight against the pro-Palestinian Jackson plank at the Democratic Convention.
Oh my, who could that be? Senator Chuck Schumer of New York. Pissed off that a black man would dare support the Palestinians, would dare see people who are being oppressed and have some type of empathy for them. Chuck Schumer has always been this way. This is who Chuck Schumer is. Look, don't get me wrong. Like, Jesse Jackson is milquetoast as far as I'm concerned. But even as milquetoast as I think that Jesse Jackson is, Chuck Schumer, from the way he looks, from the way he sounds, hates Jesse Jackson's guts because he dare take the side of the oppressed instead of the side of the colonial oppressor. That's who Chuck Schumer was. That's who Chuck Schumer is. That's who Chuck Schumer always will be. And the thing about it is that as you see them using, I'm blanking on the name of the representative that took Cori Bush's spot, but he was an AIPAC candidate, or a Cory Booker, right? Or a Barack Obama, or any name whatever black politician right now that you want. Many of them are being used by entities like AIPAC, J Street, Kufi, in order to what? Keep a hold of the black community so that we'll continue to give a thumbs up to a supremacist settler colonial entity that is oppressing brown people abroad. And let me tell you this right now, if they had established Israel in Uganda, they will be doing the same thing to black people over there. By the way, black Palestinians also exist and they're in Palestine right now, but that's something that a lot of people don't talk about. So this is the Democratic Party. And people look at me crazy when I talk about, I say both parties are trash. In the words of Bill Engvall, here's your sign. And I bet you, I haven't even looked. I bet you Chuck Schumer is saying some flowery language right now about Jesse Jackson. When here in 1988, 89, he had his tighty whities in a bunch over somebody standing with the oppressed. He had a Fruit of the Loom whole ass wedgie over a black man siding with oppressed people. I wonder what Chuck Schumer thinks about Malcolm X, about the Black Panther Party, about the Black Liberation Army. I wonder what have been Black people's association and relationship with Chuck Schumer, especially if he knows that they support the Palestinian people. Like I said, liberals can be racist too. Let's continue on. He continues to shrill
at the Democratic Convention. And I got up on that platform and I said just what I thought. And certain other states got up and booed my speech. So that just as tonight, the MC had to get up and say, give the man a chance to be heard. Well, you know what, ladies and gentlemen? Perhaps it didn't surprise me that it happened there. It surprises me that it happened here. Folks, hey, Bob, I deserve a little courtesy, don't you think? Don't you think, Bob? In conclusion, there's one man there who's clapping his hands and booing. It reminds me of the old Sid Caesar routine like this.
So yeah, nice guy, huh? Let's continue on because I want to share why. Here's the evidence as to why Chuck Schumer is so mad. He's ornery. He's angry, right? This squirrel be on it. I'm telling you. Zay Squirrel. Shout out to you, Zay Squirrel. This squirrel. Awesome coverage. But the caption says, meeting Arafat is anti-Semitic. Also, let me read the caption from this wonderful squirrel. It says, Jesse Jackson recognized the humanity of Palestinians, and for that, he was endlessly smeared as a terrorist-loving monster by the same Zionist media and political class who are now celebrating him to turn him into a harmless icon and a symbol for their own depravity. R.I.P. All right, so let's get into this, y'all.
You offended the Jews, and about you were sick and tired of hearing about the Holocaust. To say that when we're not sick and tired of hearing about black lynchings in the South and so on, I mean, we're still sympathetic. And what incredibly bad timing.
After visiting the Holocaust site, the tour guide asked me, how did I feel about it? I said, one has to have a sense of tragedy, and I think it's real tragic. I said, and the phrase that many Jewish people use, never again, really should apply to everybody, because all of us should say never again to fascism, because this is the logical conclusion of fascism.
Everybody should say never again. Everybody. It's funny how that only applies to one group, but it's not applied to Palestinians. It's funny how it's applied to Jewish people, but it's never applied to Black Americans. If never again applied to Black Americans, the 13th Amendment, that exception would not be there. If that never again happened for Black Americans, we would not be an underclass like we are. If that exception was taken out, if that never again actually was placed for Black Americans, we would have reparations for Black American freedmen. We would have it. We would have been had it. We should have got it back in 1865 under General William T. Sherman, under Special Field Order number 15, but we didn't. Why? Because genocide heir Andrew Johnson, President Andrew Johnson, said, you know what? Nah, I'm not gonna give these people reparations. The former enslavers got reparations instead of us, because they lost their slaves, they lost their income, they lost their property. So therefore, they got reparations for it. But yet we, the ones who were abused, we, the ones who were tormented and assaulted and eaten and skin made into leather and hair used as cushions. Go ahead, read the book, The Delectable Negro. It tells you everything. They used to eat us. Literally, there was cannibalism in the United States. Don't let those Epstein files fool you. That has been happening for a long time. And on top of it, the murder and sexual assault of our babies, oh yeah, that's been happening in the Black community by these enslavers for a long time. So everything you see in those Epstein files, it has precedent in the United States. It has precedent. And so when we talk about never again, it's never applied. And yet you still have a huge chunk of us that are still incarcerated over crimes that aren't even crimes anymore. How many places marijuana is legalized now? I actually agree with Jesse Jackson here. Let's continue on.
Conclusion of fascism. So you say, well, you make it sound as if it's just a humanitarian crisis when it's in fact unique. I said, well, as a social scientist, I choose to use the word tragic. He said, but unique. I say tragic. I said, I read Trail of Tears. I know how the Indians were exterminated. 60 million blacks were lost between Africa and America. Other similar.
Oh, so he pointed to the Trail of Tears. Because we're going to talk about a genocide. We're going to talk about a Holocaust. We got to talk about the Holocaust of the Native Americans, baby. Oh, 500 years of genocide. 500 years of genocide. How many of us are talking about that? Their sacred mountain has genociders on the face of it. Their sacred mountain was defaced and put the faces of the people who murdered their people on there. Then concentration camps were created, and we decided, hey, let's call them reservations. And then the people who were kidnapped, enslaved, guess what? I'm not going to go over it again, but what were our ancestors subject to? And then when we were freed, and it wasn't really a zealous choice to do so, we were basically kicked out with no money, no housing, no food. Said, you get out there, you survive. And please do not let one person, especially some racist white person, come into my comments and go, oh, but you guys are looking for reparations. You guys are just looking for handouts. I'm going to tell you something right now. And I mean no offense to anybody who is anti-racist and is working to dismantle white supremacy who is white. But I'm going to tell you right now, to all those of you who have a problem with what I just said, most of y'all, your ancestors got handouts when they had the Homestead Act that actually sent all those white families out westward to get free land and do free farms, and they got free education in order to be able to learn how to work those farms, which they learned from us in order to cultivate that land. And so your grandparents, your great-grandparents, and your great-grandparents got handouts, and that's why you guys got the family farm that you had. Because it was a handout from the government. And then because your great-great-granddaddy decided to be a slaveholder, guess what happened to him? When he lost his slaves, he got reparations for it. Where'd that money go? And please do not come into my comments telling me, oh, well, my great-grandfather or great-grandmother, oh, they came from England, or they came from France, or they came from Italy. They came here through Ellis Island. I'm going to tell you right now, your family still benefited from the white supremacist system that is always existed here. Y'all still had it easier than the rest of us. If we're going to talk about it, let's talk about it. Also, some of y'all who still have been here and said, oh, well, we never had slaves in your families, but you damn sure probably rented them. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. We're going to talk about it. Let's talk about it. Because guess what? You could also rent slaves back then. Yep. Yes. See, here's the thing. History should be taught objectively, because I'm going to tell you right now, if you don't like it, it's okay. You can always change who you are now to improve the history of the future. But the problem is, some of y'all don't want to contend with it right now because you're scared, because you're snowflakes, because you're cowards. That's what it is. Be brave. Put on your big boy pants. Put on your big girl panties. Be an adult. Accept the history and then change it to make something better. Don't sit there and cling to it. And people, please don't come to me and tell me, oh, why are you guys clinging to the past? If we're clinging to the past, your ass is clinging to the past too. Stop doing those Civil War reenactments. If you want to talk about clinging to the past, stop doing, stop celebrating the 4th of July. It's in the past. It's in the past. The American Revolution is in the past. We don't need to celebrate it no more. Like Edna Mote said, come on. No, it's in the past. She said, I don't live in the past, darling. It distracts from the now. It distracts from now then, okay? But this is what we have to talk about here. But you do live in the past. And when Jewish people say never again, you guys are like, oh, okay. But when black people say never again, oh, well, why are you still stuck on the past? If you're still stuck, if you don't want people to be stuck on the past, then give away every single thing you've ever inherited, including your family home, including the land that your family owns, because you're being stuck in the past. Oh, but you want to cling to that. And most likely, that land came from somebody who probably was black, that probably was on it, that cultivated it. If not, then it was Native Americans' land. I know I just pissed a whole bunch of people off that's probably going to be watching this later. But it is what it is. Continue.
Situations. And so he became offended because I chose to use the word tragic rather than unique, which reflects a certain hypersensitivity that we must have a new formula in the Middle East that represents more balance in our policy. We must be concerned about Palestinian justice, Lebanon's territorial integrity protected, and normalized ties with the Arab world. That must not be considered offensive.
When quotes like that come out about the Holocaust and so on, who would be out to discredit you so by getting that kind of misquote?
Well,
hang on. Let me ask you this question. Why in the world do Arabs have to pay for what was done to Jews in the Holocaust? It wasn't Arabs that committed the Holocaust. As far as I'm concerned, that was other white people. That was Germans. That was Ukrainians. That was Poles. That was Austrians. That was some Brits. That wasn't Arabs. They were just living their lives, chilling. They were chilling in Palestine. Why do they have to pay for the crimes of what happened in 1939 to 1945? Why do they have to pay for those crimes? Just a question, man. The oppressed cannot become the oppressor, because once that happens, you discredit yourself.
If,
You know,
if it is, as you say, a misquote.
Many Jewish people were insulted and outraged by virtue of the fact that we accepted Arafat's invitation to go to Lebanon. And therefore, there were many who simply attempted to sabotage the trip by trying to discredit us and therefore make our meeting with him an irrelevant trip as opposed to a relevant trip. One of the guys who helped to deal with our ticket arrangements, getting a travel agent, he became so irate over the fact that we were going to meet this anathema, this guy called Arafat, until he just simply went in rage and lost all sense of emotional balance. He did a press conference.
I mean, this is a man who worked for you?
No, he did not work for us. See, that was a lie he told. He did not work for us.
When you had your picture taken hugging Arafat, that, of course, offended a lot of people. Strange bedfellows to be hugging a member of the PLO, an organization not unassociated with terrorism.
It's a matter of respect. In that part of the world, one of the common cultural ways of greeting people is with an embrace and a hug on both sides.
I mean, certain cultures, they're huggers. They're handshakes. No, they're huggers. You mean tell me you go to Europe and, back then, they used to kiss each other on both cheeks, right? Especially in France. Part of their culture. They, when it turned into something that's not. Crazy, right? But that's what got Chuck Schumer in the tizzy. Yeah, I think it's important that we realize that was part of the nuance of somebody like a Jesse Jackson. Now, one thing I will say is this, okay? There was a bit of, there was some contention. And there are people who feel that Jesse Jackson had something to do with the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I don't know if that's for a fact. That's, as far as I know, speculation. And so I don't know the details on that. He was there at the hotel where Dr. King was assassinated. Some people feel that Jesse Jackson wanted to keep Black Americans, especially, within the confines of this system, and he wasn't radical enough, because we really should be dismantling and leaving this system in the dustbin of history. I am one of those people that feel like he was too milquetoast. He wasn't radical enough. Because what's radical is that we live in a system where we have all this wealth and we still have people who are homeless. The fact that we live in a system and we are still the child mortality, the infant mortality rate is higher among Black people in this country. The mortality rate among Black women in regards to healthcare is higher. We have disproportionately a huge number of Black people, particularly Black men, that are placed in prison. So much so that even though we're 13% of the population, we make up 50% of the exonerations in this nation. That's actually researchable. And so the thing is that I think that even though he had some right positions, I don't feel he went far enough. But at the same time, he was trying to court a presidency with America, and this system wouldn't never allow any type of liberation for us. And so when it comes to people like Jesse Jackson, this is why I say there's some nuance that has to be talked about in regards to his dealings with Black America, with America in general, his views on geopolitics, things like that. He would never go as far as what the Black Liberation Army or the Black Panther Party have went. Hell, I don't think he would ever go as far as Malcolm X did. At the same time, he was still a little bit further to the left than the Democratic Party. And if the Jesse Jackson of the 1980s was still around today with the same views, he probably would be considered further left than the AOC or Bernie Sanders. He would still be considered further left than them. And so, yeah, that was Jesse Jackson. As far as his legacy is concerned, there's more to it that I don't have time to get into, but I am sad for his family, and I hope that, you know, they find peace. Go ahead and give a like to the stream. Thank you very much. We're going to go into the chats and let's talk about it. All right. So we got the Kick chat and looks like we're okay there. All right. Okie dokie. Let's go into, see if we have any Rumble rants. There are some comments on Rumble that I definitely want to get into as well, though. All right. All right, let's get into, we do have a Rumble rant. Let's get into this one. Thank you so very much to Mary Ploppins. You remember that product called Poppin' Fresh? Ploppin' Fresh. Mary Ploppins, I just called you a fresh buttered biscuit. Fresh out the oven. Where my honey at? All right, thank you so very much for this. Mary Ploppins says, as a Black person, it is hard to imagine that truly oppressed people would turn around and act like they do. This is why people are re-examining details of the Holocaust. Interesting. Thank you so very much for that, Mary. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to call you a biscuit. Biscuits, I meant that in a very positive way. Biscuits are great, especially when you turn them into sandwiches, bacon, egg, and cheese. Oh, Lord. Don't get me started now. My big bag mode is activated now. Let's get into, let me see here. Okay. Hemcar says the NPR link has Jesse saying he's been intimidated and neutralized. I think I'm out of order on that one. It says one of the documents that was given to me by one of the researchers was a CIA document that had a stamp on it that says somewhere at the top, there must a Negro who is clean, who can step into the vacuum of chaos once Dr. King is exposed or assassinated. That was from Dr. Cynthia McKinney, former Congresswoman. Oh my gosh. Wow. Roger says, my concern, and it is well-founded through living, other marginalized groups who we've helped get their car out of the ditch and will get in their car and drive away. I mean, I get the concern. Here's the problem, though. How can I address that? You feel as if their car is in a ditch and we help them get their car out of the ditch, and now you're waiting for them to help you get your car out of the ditch, but they just drive away. In reality, they have to realize that, yes, they were able to get their car out of the ditch, but they're also low on gas. We have gas, but our car is in the ditch. So in order for us to be able to work together, well, they have to help us get our car out of the ditch, but we also have to help them get gas inside their car so they can keep going. But I think this is really just a groups working apart versus working together, right? It's like being at a dialysis center. You have a bunch of patients that are in chairs. And yes, we're all getting the same process done, but somebody may have some different times, different dialyzer, different medications that are needed to get that process done the right way. Versus us, we have our own delineated needs for us. But we're all still under the same umbrella as being treated by this one dialysis center. Well, we're all still being oppressed by the same system. Their needs may be a little bit different than ours, but we're also going through the same thing. We'll get through it. He said, not turning around to help get our car out of the ditch. I got you. Edward says, hey, JB, Trump said that he was not racist because of his friendship with Jesse Jackson. Jesse criticized Trump once Donald became president for his discrimination against minorities. That's another thing. If Donald Trump likes you or has some flowery words to say about you, that makes me look at you with a side eye. I'm just saying. You know, that's another thing. Okay, I already read that one. Unemployed Scholar says Chairman Omali Yeshitela has critiques of him. I would love to hear it, but I'm pretty sure his critiques are far more reaching than mine. Roger Meadows says, then handed the seat off to Andy Weiner. Wait. Oh, yeah, that guy. Oh, my gosh. I remember him. Oh, Christ. Don't remind me of that, Rod. Thank you so very much to Noe27 for becoming a member. Clap it up for Noe. Thank you so very much. Nice to have you. Welcome. All right. Roger says, also unfortunate, Cherokee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, Creek, Muskogee, and Seminole nations in the 1800s adopted slavery. That is also unfortunate too. It's a harsh truth. You know, that is unfortunate. And that has to be dealt with as well. Roger said us, we suspect Jesse Jackson knew what was about to happen and positioned MLK on the balcony to get it done. Perhaps we can now see if some government documents to see if Jesse Jackson was an informant for the government. I'm actually interested in seeing that, actually. Maybe he was. I don't know. But there are people who say that it's possible that he was that guy, man. Yeah. Teresa says, yeah, hard to know who to trust again. I think plays a role too. Yeah. Edward says, our greatest modern prophets are Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. Jesse Jackson was not that in that level because he was not radical enough. Wow. I didn't see this. Roger says, unfortunately, our freedmen ancestors fought native indigenous to protect white colonizers and settlers as they continue their expansion to the west, as they were already driven from the east. Yeah, that's another thing. That Buffalo Soldiers. It's really the pitting each other against one another, man. It's like our ancestors fought them, and then they fought, and some of them enslaved us because it's just that's the rough part of the history, man. But yeah, unfortunately. All right. I'm gonna end with this one. Sean Rocker said Chuck looked like a miserable little, and I'm not gonna read the rest, but y'all can read. Oh my gosh. I'm not trying to laugh. If I laugh, am I going to hell? Oh my gosh. Yikes. All right. So Roger said you skipped some. I think I got them all now. Did I? Oh, I didn't see this one. Why is it not starring? Thank you very much for this one. Roger says they held slaves on their land, particularly in Indian Territory, Oklahoma, until forced to abolish the practice by treaties in 1866. It's all history. Yeah. Oh yeah, I definitely missed that one. I'm sorry. Yeah. And I had read that one already. Man, come on, StreamYard. What are you doing? You're supposed to star these automatically. Okay, I think I got them all. I think I did. I don't want to miss any because people spend hard-earned money, man, and I don't want to Oh, wait. Roger says, I wish you could play Eddie Murphy SNL rendition of Jesse Jackson singing High Me Town, part of an R&B group. Jesse Jackson got to the left of MLK on Palestine. MLK used to be anti-Zionist equal to he said to be anti-Zionist is equal to anti-Semitic. Martin wasn't perfect. That's for damn sure. Yeah, I think I got everything. I hope so. I think I did. If I missed any, guys, please let me know. I gotta get on to the next. Okay, I think that's it. I think I got. Okay. All right. Thank you, guys. Okay. All right, let's get on to the next one. So, of course, we talked about Jesse Jackson now, and then we also talked about what we can learn about Venezuela. Since we talked about Jesse Jackson, I want to get to this reparations story because this is basically a good segue into that. And this is a positive story. But I want to provide some nuance and I have some questions about this one. So we're going to get into this one. $25,000 cash reparations. All right. Let's get it. So I guess black families in Evanston, Illinois got reparations. This is a positive thing, but I do have questions because I want to make sure that if this is really cash reparations, are they going to people who are descendants of American chattel slavery? Let's get in to this story because ultimately this has to be something that we talk about more, and I hope to see more of this happening, but we don't know. This could be a fluke. I don't want it to be, but let's go. All right, folks. So it says Illinois City hands out $25,000 through cash payments to 44 black residents from a reparations program. So it says Evanston, Illinois will issue $25,000 to 44 residents in reparations payments. The city's reparations committee has announced. Established in 2019 and approved by the city council in 2021, the program issues $25,000 direct cash payments to black residents and descendants of black residents who lived in Evanston between 1919 and 1969. Evanston was the first city in the nation to pass a reparations plan, pledging $10 million over a decade to black residents. The payments are intended to cover housing expenses. So it says Tashik Kerr, assistant to the city manager, said during a meeting last week that the residents will be contacted to inform their payments are on the way over the next few weeks. According to a city memo, the fund has received $276,588 from Evanston's real estate transfer tax. The committee discussed taxing Delta 8 THC products to sustain funding in the future. So basically, it is cannabis, but is using the Delta 8 strain that is sold in a lot of smoke shops. So that will be interesting. It says Alderman Chrissy Harris recognized that the tax would not significantly increase revenue. though it would help keep moving that number forward for the reparations process. It is really important for people to understand that we pay as we have the money. And it's not that we're withholding from paying anyone. It's just we have to accumulate the funds to make sure we can pay. All right. So it says reparations fund did not receive any philanthropic donations this year as of January 31st. Of course, no philanthropic reparations, only through taxes. It says, so this fund is primarily supported by cannabis sales tax and real estate tax money. Judicial Watch filed a lawsuit against Evanston's reparations program last year due to its use of race as an eligibility requirement for the program. The watchdog group alleges that the program violates the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment, which is something that I have a question about. Here's my concern with this. I want the reparations to continue. I just want to make sure that the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed when it comes to this. Now, I did have a conversation with reparations activist Naheem Way a few months ago about the difference between lineage-based reparations versus status-based reparations. So lineage-based reparations means that you go back in your lineage to see who was an American chattel slave. Status is more of the legal framework of you being a descendant of freedmen, and basically you are a Black American freedman. Technically, it kind of sounds the same. But the goal is to make sure that it's not because you're Black that you're receiving reparations, but that you're a descendant of Black Americans that were subject to chattel slavery, which means that you may have some people who may be white passing, who may also get reparations. It's not based on what you can see with your eyes, but it's based on maybe a blood test or some cheek swabs and DNA in order to be able to find out who is entitled. The reason why is because, like I was saying to Chris earlier today, Chris Begley, is that from all the way from Canada all the way down to the very tip of Argentina, essentially, there are Black people of African descent all over this entire North and South American continent, all over, that have been brought here because of chattel slavery. That being said, we're talking about chattel slavery within the United States of America. And that's the only area that's being spoken of for reparations. So let's say you are somebody who is Afro-Brazilian. Reparations would not apply to you in the United States because you're Black. Or let's say you are from Haiti, or if you're from Jamaica, it would not apply because your chattel slavery did not come from the United States. Your chattel slavery came from France, England, Portugal, Spain, right? So the reparations will be due to you from those countries versus those of us within the borders of the United States of America will receive reparations first from our country. And then once those reparations are repaid and it's satisfied, then maybe some of us can also look outside the United States and go, hey, England, you got to pay up because y'all also participated in that too. But we're not there yet because chattel slavery still continues under the United States. And so therefore we're looking for reparations from our own government first because they continued the system of chattel slavery and it didn't end right after the American Revolution and continued until 1865. Technically, it's still going on right now. So to me, slavery is still going on right now. So therefore, anybody that's working for free or nearly free in prison, they're also owed reparations, including when it comes to mass incarceration. But that's a whole other story we got to talk about later. So this is why it talks about, and you'll hear a lot of Black Americans talk about delineation. That delineation means is that it's basically saying, okay, so this group has been subject to this issue within these borders from this time to this time, and so therefore the existence of the United States affects just these particular Black people that are descendant of slave in this area. Now, this isn't about racial justice. This is about justice for chattel slavery. If you want to get into racial justice, that incorporates a lot further, broader, to more Black people out, even outside the United States, because if you want to talk about just pure racial justice, then that's a whole different animal, because then that also not only incorporates us, it also incorporates all of the people who are Afro-Latino, who are from south of the border of Mexico, because yes, there are also Afro-Mexicans. By the way, even if we were to do reparations for Americans of chattel slavery, some Mexicans will actually get it too. And by Mexicans, I mean Afro-Mexicans who are descendants of chattel slaves that fled south of the border from American chattel slavery. Yes, some chattel slaves fled to the south. They didn't go north because of where they were. They went south. Some Canadians, some Black Canadians will receive reparations because they fled north out of chattel slavery. So they'll be due reparations as well from the United States, because they're descendants of chattel slavery within the United States, because their descendants were here before they fled. So let's be real. That's why. And then you have, look, I'm gonna start using Black terms. You got some people that, well, if we're in the South, some people that are red bone, they may look white passing, they're gonna get reparations. And you'd be like, they get reparations? They don't look Black, but yes, they are. Some people that are high yellow, they get the reparations. Like, I don't know if they Black. They are. Some people that might be mixed, they might be able to be eligible for reparations, depending on how we determine that. Guess what? They will be able to get it as well. So that's my concern, is I want to make sure that it's within the legal framework, because if it violates the 14th Amendment, then people are going to go, nope, we can't do reparations. See? And then they go, that's trillions of dollars that we don't have to pay out. When in reality, it is a debt that is owed, and we want to make sure that that debt is paid. And we wanted to make sure that through the legal frameworks that it is guaranteed and ironclad and cannot be reneged on. This is why I have concern, and I want to make sure everything's on the up and up. This thing needs to be locked, loaded, and copacetic. You got to lock in, baby. Copacetic. I want to make sure this thing is solid. Like peaches and herbs, solid as a rock. You know what I mean? But this is a good thing, but I want to make sure that it's solid. Since to date, Evanston has awarded over $6,350,000 to 254 individuals based on their race. See, that's the part I'm cringing over. I'm just like, it should be status or lineage, not race. Now, part of me is wondering if the New York Post is just using this as fuel to get people to be anti-reparations, because it probably might be based on status. It says the city must be stopped before it spends even more money on its clearly discriminatory and unconstitutional reparations program. That's from Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton, right? It says similar calls for reparations have been gaining traction in the United States as measures are being introduced in state legislators and being pushed by grassroots activists. Municipalities and states recently launched exploratory efforts on the matter, forming committees to examine the effects of slavery to calculate how compensation would be dispensed. So the committee did not immediately respond to Fox News Digital for a request for comment. Okay, so basically that's essentially what's going on in Evanston, Illinois. My thing is like I said, I want this to continue, but I want to make sure that this is ironclad, that you cannot go up against this and challenge it in court and win and say, oh, well, they're just basing it on race. They're just being racist. Like, no, it has to be based on status. I say both lineage and status, because if you are a descendant of somebody that was subject to chattel slavery, then therefore you are owed reparations. And people can go, well, how are you guys going to be able to do that? Baby, 23andMe exists. Ancestry.com exists. We actually have DNA tests that y'all can take, and you can find out who your parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents. I was able to track down my fifth great-grandfather, who was born in 1792 in Essex County, Virginia. Born 16 years after the American Revolution, on my mama's side. And so you don't think that we can't get reparations and follow the through line all the way back? Baby, please. So that's the thing. Like, it can be discovered. It's just people have to want to do it. Or we have to force them to do it. We have to create institutions that make it happen. Like I said, Black Americans, we can't ask for reparations. We have to take it. Whatever legal framework we got to use it. And so that's the thing, right? So this is why I say, hey, this is a good thing, but I'm like, is it going to hold? You know what this feels like? This feels like when you don't know your check just came in, and so you're swiping your debit card and you're hoping that the money hits your account right before you got to the checkout line. And you got your arms, legs, fingers, and eyes all crossed because you are trying to make sure that goes through, because you got some food, because you don't feel like being embarrassed and having to put that grocery back. You know what I mean? That's how it feels right now. And I don't want to feel like that. I don't want Black people to feel like that. We've been feeling like that for way too long. Is this a good thing? Yes. I just want to guarantee that it doesn't get reneged on. Because reparations is owed. I just don't want this to be a fumble. All right. Thank you so very much. Let's get into the comments. All right, y'all. Let me go into the Kick chat. All right. We are good on the Kick side. All right. All right. Thank you so very much for that. We're going to go into, okay, looks like we're good on the Rumble. No Rumble rant. All right, so Unemployed Scholar says, reparations, thank you very much for this. Reparations Tribunal, 1982, Brooklyn, New York, $4.1 trillion for stolen labor, not including damages owed to African domestic colony enslaved in the United States. Woo! $4.1 trillion. 44 years ago, baby. And if you think it's that much now, wait till they calculate the money for 2026. And if we were counting interest, if we added interest, the United States will be owned by Black people. Teresa said, didn't Procter & Gamble buy 23andMe? unfortunately, all these DNA companies are owned by some type of big corporation. My thing is like, look, you don't even need any one of these big companies. I mean, or you could just, you know, I know it doesn't apply here, but almost kind of like a Defense Production Act type of thing, where it's like, okay, you're going to get all this, or just get some like genealogical office that also focuses on, you know, DNA testing, and then have them do it, and then just, you know, the government pump funds into them in order to be able to do it en masse for 40 million people. I mean, come on, it can be done. It's just the problem is that people don't want to do it. Fire Ripple says, tell it, JB. Wish no one had to give their DNA to do this, but super grateful it's happening. Yeah. But it shouldn't be limited to just, oh, are they black or are they not? You know, like I know somebody that's a friend of the family, and she's high yellow, and she could be mistaken for white, but she's black. You know what I mean? And so it's just sad. Let's see. Let me see. Fire Repo said no 40 acres because 40 acres just about anywhere is more than 25,000. Asking, not telling. I mean, you got a point there. You know. Teresa says land back now, like Jackie from BPM says. That's the only way to get power. Yeah. Of course. Edward says, agreed, reparations are owed to Black Americans because of loss of labor, family separation, and suffering endured. Yep. A sip of water to you, Hefgar. Says, but if America was owned by Black people, what would happen to all those poor pedophile torturers? Woo. Teresa says, I just think a monopoly of one now, United Corporations of America. Yeah. All right. So let's get into the next segment. Here. This is going to be the final segment, y'all. We're going to talk about black hair. To talk about hazardous chemicals. I want to share this with y'all because ultimately what's going on with black hair, I'm telling you, we got to talk. So I'm going to share this with y'all, and then we're going to be getting into it. So, Black people, beware. I get into it. If you're a Black woman, stop before you go to that hair store. If you pick up that hair, girl, put it down, listen to this, and then be educated and let's talk. Because look, I'm trying to make sure you good. All right. I'm going to share this with you guys first. And then we're going to be getting into this conversation because I think that Black women really need to just consider this before they put something on their head. Because I love y'all and I want y'all to live as long as possible. So I'm going to keep this muted, but y'all need to hear that. Y'all need to see this. So they're making what it looks like it's like plastic pellets, right? See that? All right. It goes into an oven, comes out, and what's that? Oh. Yep, there you go. And then gathers it up. Yes, this is the faster version. But then, guess what that is? Synthetic hair, y'all. That's synthetic hair. Here's my question to y'all, though. What is in the makeup of those pellets? What's the chemical makeup of those? Also, what happens when heat is applied to those pellets? Are there any chemicals, any gases, anything that is leaked? Hair is porous. Hair can actually absorb different chemicals, and those follicles are directly linked to blood vessels. So if that's the case, then is there anything that could travel through and into our bodies that could be damaging to us? This is something I think that we need to talk about. And why do women, black women particularly, have to do this? Unfortunately, it has to do with white supremacy. Our hair is seen as unkept or unruly by Eurocentric beauty standards. And so because of that, a lot of black women, especially in the workplace, have to do things to make their hair appear more European or more orderly for professional spaces. Unfortunately, human hair is more expensive. Synthetic is cheaper. And so to save money, and particularly for a lot of more working class and poorer black women, they have to use a synthetic hair in order to be able to make themselves more neat in comparison to their white counterparts because of Eurocentric beauty standards. And so these may come in the form of wigs, weaves, sew-ins, or it could be extensions. And so this can be harmful if there's chemicals within these extensions. And so this is why it's so important for us to recognize how white supremacy even affects us in health. Because guess what happens with black women and their health gets poor? They have to go to the hospital. They have to deal with the medical community. And like Levert the Baseman said, a doctor is to a black woman what police are to black men. And they have to deal with that as well. So there was a report that recently came out, and I really want to get into this because black women and femmes and those of you who may want to put synthetic hair in your head, including for your little ones, I want you guys to pay attention to this, because this it'll make you think twice about getting that synthetic hair at the hair shop, at the beauty shop.
We are digging into an alarming new report about popular hair products. For many black women, hair braiding with synthetic hair extensions is a common practice, often referred to as a protective style to strengthen and grow the hair. In fact, the market for hair braids, wigs, and extensions is expected to grow at least $6 billion by 2029. That's according to Evanston market research. But Consumer Reports find some synthetic hair, often marketed to black women and girls, contains carcinogens and at times lead. The findings are leading some
lead. Lead. You know what's sad is that you have some black women and girls that are drinking bottled water in Flint, Michigan because they're so concerned about the lead, and yet there's lead in the synthetic hair that they're putting in because they can't afford the real hair, or they can't afford the plant-based hair to put in their heads because it's too expensive. And so that's what they can afford. And they can't look, they can't look with their hair natural, because if they go to work with their hair natural, then that's considered to be unacceptable by Eurocentric beauty standards. So they have to get these extensions, these sew-ins, these weaves, so that they can look presentable to white people. And they have to use these synthetic hair extensions that are sold at beauty stores all up and down in black neighborhoods. And yet you're getting lead in your system anyway. And lead is very toxic. And also lead can lead to things like even having an uptick in anger and things like that. So it also affects us mentally. So, baby, it's not because her braids aren't on too tight. It's because she got synthetic hair and that lead is seeping into her bloodstream and causing her to have mental reactions. Because of the corporations doing what they're doing and trying to do things for cheap so that they can make money off of us. Thus poisoning the women and femmes within our community. And I say women and femmes because I'm also including Black trans women that are also affected by this too. Or even femme gay men that may want to have, some synthetic hair in their head. Let's say you get some synthetic hair in your head. It's free cover at the club. Y'all ready to get down at the club. You're dancing. They got on some of the hits. They got on Snap Your Fingers. You there. You can do it all by yourself. And then you're sweating. You're hot. Your pores open up. And that chemical that's inside those synthetic extensions is now seeping into your body. And guess what happens? That starts to have an effect on your health. Then now you got to go to the doctor because you're not feeling well. And now you have to experience racial and gender discrimination. And if you're queer, anti-queer discrimination when you're at the hospital, when you're at the doctor. Which adds on. And please do not be pregnant with synthetic hair on your head. Because guess who's that going to? It's going to the baby too. Right? And you're sleeping next to your partner, and they're close to that synthetic hair on a nightly basis. And guess what? Can affect them too. And don't have a baby and start breastfeeding while having synthetic hair in your head. And this is what corporations do, and it leads to a cascading effect on Black women, which also includes having an effect on who? Black men. And it follows down, and it's a domino effect. And then if you get sick, then you have to take off of work. If you have to take off of work, then guess what? That means that's less money for rent. That's less money for electric. That's less money for food because you're sick. Who's going to be able to take care? I don't care if you ain't got no kids. Who's going to take care of the cat? How are you going to take care of yourself? This is why these corporations are evil. Let's continue on, y'all. I'm just predicting things as they would happen.
Led. The findings are leading some to ask how protective these styles really are. And one of those people is Crystal Thomas. She is a medical student who published commentary about this issue in an academic journal.
About 2 years ago, I decided to get braids for the first time in over a decade. And I was really excited about it at first, but as the day went on, I realized there was this unbearable smell. As I kept smelling this, my throat tightened up. It felt very dry, and I noticed my hair was itching. It was just difficult to breathe overall. After a week of continuous washing, I said, seeing that the smell didn't go away, I said, you know what? I'm getting rid of these. As consumers, we implicitly want to believe that the products we purchase are safe. That's not always the case. Black women are a higher risk for uterine fibroids, for more aggressive breast cancers, and so on. Is exposure to these products a contributing factor or not?
Here to help.
And you think you're saving money by getting synthetic hair because you don't have enough money to pay for the real hair, because maybe you just got a job. Maybe you're just trying to look good for when you start. Or maybe you didn't get a job yet, but you're trying to look good for that interview. Maybe you're about to graduate, and maybe you want to walk across that stage with your hair flowing, looking good, looking on point. You want to look your best. And these corporations know that. They know this. Maybe you're going out on a date. Maybe you're about to get married. And you want your boo to see you in your best. But you can't afford the real hair. You have to go with synthetic. This system's vicious. It's horrible. And I don't hear a damn thing from anybody, especially libertarians, who talk about, oh, well, we shouldn't have any regulations. We should just let the market decide. This is the market deciding. They decided that Black women's lives don't matter. That's exactly what the market decided. Because they want to make money off of us looking good at the cost of our lives. At the cost of my mamas, your sisters, your grandmothers. What happens when your grandma decides to retire, or she's there for her 30, 40, 50th anniversary and she decides to get braids in her hair, but the hair is synthetic? Now what? The reason why I'm putting in all these scenarios is because it happens in our lives. How many of our sisters, aunties, cousins are at that family reunion, especially in the summertime? You know it gets hot. So they ain't putting on no damn wig because it's hot. So of course they're going to get box braids. Of course they're going to get plaits. Duh. And these are supposed to be protective styles because they don't want to damage their hair. And yet their body's getting damaged by these chemicals. This is why, as Black people, we have to fight against capitalism as well. Those of us who are educated, when you know better, you do better. Us as educated Black people have to fight against a system that not only subjected our ancestors to enslavement, but also what subjects us not only to wage slavery, but also health slavery, housing slavery, as well as education or lack thereof slavery. We have to fight against this system. It is a stupid and inconsistent and depraved system that is making our families sick. Let's continue on.
Us explore some of those questions is Ami Zoda. She's an associate professor at Columbia University School of Public Health. Thank you so much for joining us. So I want to start with some of Consumer Reports findings, and they really raised some eyebrows. They looked at 10 different synthetic hair products from multiple companies, and 100% of them, they found carcinogens. Those are chemicals that can cause cancer. In 9 out of 10, they found lead, and they often found other issues in compounds, and they also found volatile organic compounds, or VOCs. So my question to you is...
Okay, let's stop here. It says chemicals that may lead to cancer detected in 100% of samples. Every single sample was tested and found to have cancer-causing agents in them. My sisters, my femmes, mamas, aunties, cousins, nieces, the femme gay boys that want to let their hair flow, especially when they go to the ballroom. All of you guys. Stop wearing synthetic hair. Let's stop. We want you guys to live. We want you all to live as long as possible, as healthy as possible. We love y'all. It says lead detected in 9 out of 10 samples. That means 90% of the samples contained lead. Lead is very toxic to human beings. Other volatile organic compounds include acetone, which is detected in all products. They're making money off of us by poisoning us. This is what they do. Add on top of that the relaxers that some of y'all use, right? I can smell the relaxer right now. Can we talk about the box colors? Right? How many of you black women, when y'all were little girls, they used to get you that box of Just For Me? I'd rather you go through the pain of a hot comb off the stove than use that box. I can still smell the hot comb in the air right now. But at least that's not as bad as having cancer-causing agents that are placed in your head. And when heat is applied, like, how do you get, like, let's say you get a weave or a sew-in, but it's synthetic hair. How do you get it to curl? Well, you gotta apply what? Heat. Does that release chemicals? Also, are the chemicals, also when heat is applied, are they fumes that come out? Is the hairdresser breathing that in? When you walk into a salon and somebody's getting synthetic hair put in, is that wafting through the air and affecting everybody else? I'm just asking questions. Because I want to make sure that the people in my life are protected. Let's continue.
What is the impact of repeated exposure to chemicals like this, especially given that braids are so often worn for weeks at a time?
Yes, thank you for that question, and thank you for covering this important issue. So I just want to say first that this important new report adds to a growing body of evidence that really shines a light on the fact that hair products, as well as other beauty products and cosmetics, especially those marketed to Black women and girls, contain many chemicals of concern, and that we need to do something about it to make sure people are protected. But specifically to the report, we know that some of these chemicals, like lead and benzene, are really problematic for health, and that really there's no safe level of exposure. We also know other chemicals like methylene chloride, which was found in certain products, is banned in consumer products from the EPA, and it's also on the restricted list of chemicals by the FDA. So they have a list of 11 chemicals that are not allowed in cosmetics, and methylene chloride is one of them.
Wow. And notably, right, this was a study of 10 products, but there are so many more on the market. Crystal Thomas, who we heard from, said she used Kaneka, and we reached out to all of the brands who were in that study. We did not immediately hear back, but prior, Consumer Reports got a statement from Kaneka, and they said in part that they only manufacture the fibers that are used in the hair products, but they do not produce the final product. And so my question to you is, who is ultimately responsible for what goes into our cosmetics and our hair products?
That's a great question. So at the national level, the FDA regulates cosmetics,
but not synthetic braids. Not right now.
Not right now. But really, this industry is really underregulated.
This is why I say that when people talk about, oh, well, we need less regulation, this is what it looks like. Oh, well, we shouldn't be using we should vote with our dollars and then just stop buying them. There are women who need to make their hair look good because of Eurocentric beauty standards. If they want to get that job, then they're going to have to put in that synthetic hair because that's all they can afford, because now they're going to be putting it in under duress, putting their life and health at risk, all because they need to get that job, or they want to look good for their wedding, or they want to look good for graduation, or they just want to feel good about themselves. And they can't afford to vote with their dollars because guess what? Even if they did, then they don't have enough money to get the real human hair. They don't have enough money to get the plant-based hair. So guess what? And then if they go with their natural hair, then guess what they do? They get turned down for jobs, or people look at them weird or funny. Or they get turned down for opportunities. So they have to wear these because there's no other choice. And please don't come to me talking about a Black woman who has cancer already, and then next thing you know, she has to get braids put in. And then she puts in cancer-causing synthetic hair in her head, but she doesn't know it causes cancer. How many people are going to actually see this and they're not even going to know about this issue? This is why now I gotta let my mama know. I gotta contact my nieces. I gotta talk to my cousins. I gotta let them all know about this. But are they going to be able to have enough money to get the alternative? No, they won't. Because, and then even if they do, well, I'm not going to have it in that long. I just needed to get this job, or I just need it for this event. And they're going to wear it under duress. This is why I say things like this need to be regulated.
So they don't have authority to recall products. They don't have a list of chemicals of concern that companies have to check for. And even for the types of tests that companies often do to test the health and safety, they're really looking for acute health concerns like gross, like very extreme reproductive and developmental toxicity.
Right, but these longer studies take more time.
Right.
So I wonder, for someone at home in a line or two, what's your advice to them if they say, I want to braid my hair, but I don't know if it's safe?
That's a great question. So I think there are a few companies that are trying to make non-toxic plant-based alternatives. Of course, they're expensive, but I think you can, use the power of your dollar to support them. I also think at the state level, there are some good initiatives going on that are trying.
I'm gonna push back on something. She said, use the power of your dollar. That means that you have to have dollars in order to have power. Some of us ain't got it. What does that tell you? Lord.
I also think at the state level, there are some good initiatives going on that are trying to create more transparency and greater regulation.
Yeah, and more people are looking for that too. Ami Zoda, really insightful. Thank you so much. And if you have a story, let us know. Stay with us.
So, yeah. I feel like more Black women, y'all may have to start doing the twist. Y'all may have to start just locking it and just do locks. I'm telling you right now, or do protective styles, do box braids, and let that grow. And then, if there's somebody that makes all natural products, that small business that helps your hair grow, so you won't have to do this. Yeah, you won't have to use synthetic hair, but at the same time, it's going to cost an investment. But I'm just telling you right now, when I hear stories about this, it just makes me think, this is why we need to change the system, because it targets some of the most vulnerable. And on the socioeconomic ladder, Black women at the bottom, man, even when it comes to regards to their health. So if you are a Black woman, cis or trans, I don't care. If you are a Black girl, if you are a Black boy, gay boy that wants to wear long hair, I don't care. Please stay away from the synthetic hair. Stay away. The safer option may be wigs, maybe, but that may have some implications too. But just be safe out there, Share this video with people as much as you possibly can, because I really want people to be safe out there. And it's not just limited to Black women. It's also goes out to all women who may be forced to wear synthetic hair, but this is targeted really towards Black women a lot. This is why we say protect Black women. Thank you very much. Please go ahead and like the stream. Let's go into the Kick chat. I think we're decent on Kick right now. Yes. All right. So we're good on Kick. All right. And let's check, see You see. Ooh. Okay. Let me go into, we do have a Rumble rant. Human Dictionary, Hipcar. Between Hipcar and Roger Meadows, man, they are human encyclopedias. Hemcar, thank you so very much for this. Says, check out the book or film Toxic Beauty. On a side note, PBS's Poison Squad is good too. I'm gonna have to check that out. I wonder if Sabby knows about this story. She probably will say, I'm not surprised. Okay. And I'll get to the rest of those in the regular chat. I'm just telling you, man. Roger being thirsty now. He says, nothing, and I mean nothing, is more sexy than a black woman with those skinny, fresh, deep black braids. You just and grab a handful. Roger, calm down, brother. Calm down, okay? I know you love your Nubian queens. I know, but come on, bro. This is a family show. Oh Lord, what am I gonna do with you, Roger? He said where they celebrated Confederate stars in bars. Yeah. Sean Rocker says, I don't even do so much as dye my hair. Said, I embrace my gray streaks. Besides, you never know what you'd be trying to fix your hair with. Yep. That's why on this skin and on this head, it is pure 100% organic Ghanian shea butter. That's it. Ghanian shea butter. That's what I use. That's why my hair looks so good. Yep. Yes, honey. I want my hair back and forth. Okay. D7 says, thanks for broaching this topic. Thank you very much for tuning in. Alwyn Same says, I guess Columbia University would not step out and name names of products that harm or give actionable advice. Yeah, Scholars. Good to see you, Skylar. Says that means you have to have the dollars to have the power. Yup. And then on top of that, because people think, oh, well, you have to get the synthetic hair, but the synthetic hair, I'm sorry, you have to get the real hair instead of synthetic, but the real hair is already expensive, and then you have to pay for somebody to put it in. Not everybody is a hairstylist. So you have to pay the hairstylist or the braider to put it in. And if you're doing a weave or sew-in, you got to pay for that on top of the hair as well. You know what I mean? Aura says the power of the dollar argument would have worked better if there was an actual living wage. Exactly. It's also a class issue. Hemcar says, I frequently note how Reagan pushed drugs on us streets that got their beloved cops killed. Skylar says, how can people even check their hair for these chemicals? Like, what are we supposed to do? NBC News. Yeah, this is why, like, I say just stay away from the synthetic hair, or if you can see the ingredients on the package of hair, I mean, read that. But with all else fails, if it can grow out of a human head, then you're probably going to be good. Just stay away from the synthetic stuff. D7 says, no offense, I wouldn't want real hair from other humans, but I hear you about the job market. Yeah, some people are different. when it comes to stuff like that. And people are talking about the smell of hair, of hair stores and nail salons. I can smell them. I can smell it from here. I just think about it. Yes, lead. Oh Lord, yes. That's why I showed how it was made in the beginning, because I was just like, I don't know if that's right to have on you. Hemp Sahar says fluorescent nanoparticles in Coke and Pepsi. And Pepsi was marketed like crazy to black people. Sean says, is it worse to donate hair to, for example, Locks of Love? I heard Locks of Love has some issues. I know there's one called Wigs for Kids. And this is really marketed to people who are going through chemotherapy. But there may be some smaller, more grassroots wig makers that you can probably go with that also do ones for people. So I would probably go with them. You have to do your research though, because they don't, people be crazy, Chris says, remember the Chris Rock documentary, Good Hair? Yes, I actually watched that documentary. Things like this should also be included. Oh, yeah. Fire Ripple says, yeah, I think Locks got caught in the scam. Yeah, Locks of Love, yeah. And then Skylar says, I used to work at Coke in college. When my friend showed me how Coke can clean up a corroded car battery, I stopped drinking that crap. Pepsi too, even though I was a Pepsi fan. I was a Coca-Cola fan. I was a Coca-Cola fan, but I rarely drink soda at all anymore. It's like once every 2-3 months, I'll have like a couple of ounces of soda, and that's it. Water, tea, maybe once, a month, I'll have some like Crystal Light or something like that. But I really don't drink soda. I just drink tea and water. But yeah. All right, guys. I am way over time, but I just wanted to give a big shout out and thank you guys for, being here for me throughout this entire stream. You guys have stuck it out with me. I appreciate it very much. Also, if you guys would like to, I also did a recent, I had a recent conversation with a comrade on my other channel, Kind Connections podcast. I will share the link in the chat in a second, but I recently did a conversation with Game.Film. We talked video games. And so that was a really great conversation. So, and I'm in the works of having more people to have conversations with. So, of course, we talked about, gaming, things like that. Of course, I talked to people like Joey Peltier, Ron Pacone, Delilah Barrios. I talked to Right Brain Studios, and I have another guest that I will be talking to, that I will be showing you guys my conversation with on the 22nd. So I'll be getting to editing that soon. But I just want to thank you guys for tuning in, because honestly, it is definitely a labor of love when it comes to doing this type of content, and I try to inform you guys as much as possible. And so here is the link to Kind Connections podcast. And look, go right now to Sabby Sabs. She's about to go live, and I will see you guys in the next one, because I'm sure she's going to be talking. She's going to go a deeper dive into things behind Jesse Jackson that I didn't get into. And so it's going to be very interesting to hear her take on it. Go ahead and go watch her and, you know, support my sister over there. She's doing great work. All right, guys. Water your plants, water yourselves, leave the world better than you found it. Smoke them if you got them, drink them if you got them. If you ain't got them, then watch something funny because joy is revolutionary. Read because reading is fundamental. Stay away from synthetic hair because I love you. And less synthetic hair, more oatmeal raisin cookies. Mwah! Forehead kisses to every single one of y'all. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you so much for watching, and I appreciate it from the top and bottom of my heart. If you'd like to see any more, you can look here. Mwah! Forehead kisses. Have